A year after doctors said my wife died from a sudden stroke, I finally called a plumber to repair a slow leak hidden behind the wall of her old office. I was in church when my phone started buzzing in my hand. The plumber's voice was tight, almost shaken. "Sir, you need to get back here immediately," he said. "I found something inside your wife's office, and whatever you do, don't mention this to anyone." When I walked back into my house, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. My wife hadn't just left memories behind. She had left a secret one so dark, it had the power to tear my family apart forever. I'm truly grateful you're here. If that opening moment caught your attention, stay with me, because what unfolds next will change everything. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories reach, and it reminds me that we're connected across cities and countries. And let me ask you, if you uncovered a secret hidden inside your own home, one that could destroy your family, would you open it or walk away? Comment your answer below. Please note some elements are dramatized for reflection and learning. Any resemblance to actual individuals or situations is purely coincidental. The phone rang on a quiet Tuesday afternoon exactly 6 months after I buried my wife. I remember the date because I had circled it on the calendar without realizing why. Some part of me had been counting. 6 months since the earth closed over her coffin. 6 months since doctors used the words "sudden stroke" with clinical certainty and sympathetic eyes. 6 months since my world narrowed into silence. I was sitting in the living room of the house we had shared for 42 years. The same cream-colored sofa, the same oak coffee table Josephine insisted on refinishing herself. But it no longer felt like our home. It felt like a museum. A preserved space filled with artifacts of a life that had ended too abruptly. My gaze drifted, as it often did, to the closed door at the end of the hallway. Josephine's office. I hadn't opened it since the morning she died. I told myself I wasn't ready, that grief needed boundaries. But the truth was simpler. I was afraid. Afraid of the quiet inside that room. Afraid of the absence. Afraid of finding her perfume still lingering in the curtains, her glasses folded neatly beside her desk, her handwriting waiting mid-sentence on a notepad. My phone vibrated against my palm. The sudden sound jolted me. Wesley Kane, the plumber I had finally hired after ignoring for months the slow drip that echoed behind that closed door. "A small leak," he'd said. "Nothing urgent," I answered. Mr. Caldwell. Wesley's voice sounded strained. Not irritated, not casual, strained. "Yes, you need to come home, right now." My chest tightened. "I'm at the grocery store. I'll be there shortly." "Sir," he said, lowering his voice. "I found something you need to see." There was a pause. A long one. "And Mr. Caldwell, don't come alone. Bring your son. Bring both your sons if you have them." The call ended. I stood in the middle of Safeway's produce section, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, my half-filled cart abandoned beside apples and lettuce. The words echoed in my mind. Don't come alone. Why would he say that? I left the cart where it was and walked out without paying, without thinking. The drive home felt unreal, like I was moving through someone else's memory. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles blanched. The crisp autumn air of Lake Oswego brushed against my face through the cracked window, but I felt none of it. When I pulled into the driveway, Wesley's truck sat there like a warning sign. He opened the door before I could reach for my key. Sawdust clung to his flannel shirt. His usually steady expression looked pale, unsettled. "Mr. Caldwell," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. Sorry for what." My voice barely sounded like mine. He stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter. We walked down the hallway together, past the framed photo of Josephine and me at our 25th anniversary, past Dennis's graduation portrait. The house felt different now. Watching. We stopped in front of the office door. 6 months I had avoided this threshold. Wesley didn't hesitate. He pushed it open. The sight inside stole the air from my lungs. The room looked disturbed, violated. The carpet had been pulled back near the wall behind Josephine's desk. Tools lay scattered across the floor, and the wall itself gone. Not just cut. Removed. Wooden studs exposed, jagged and raw. The leak was behind this wall, Wesley explained carefully. I had to open it up. But once I did, he lifted his flashlight and aimed it into the hollow space beyond the studs. You need to see this. I stepped closer. Behind the wall was a hidden cavity roughly 5 by 6 feet. Unfinished drywall. Unpainted surfaces. This wasn't part of the original structure. It had been built. Deliberately, in the far corner of that hidden space embedded into the frame, was a small safe. My pulse thundered in my ears. I didn't touch it, Wesley said quickly. Stopped the moment I saw it. Josephine had built this. My wife. The woman who told me everything. Who shared every bank statement, every fear, every late-night thought. And yet she had carved a secret chamber into our house without telling me. The safe had a digital keypad, 4 digits. My hands trembled as I typed 0615. June 15th, 1982, the day we married. The lock clicked. Inside were 3 items, a USB drive, a leather-bound journal I immediately recognized, and several manila folders labeled in Josephine's precise handwriting. Dennis, Celeste, Dr. Malcolm Crane, Sebastian Langston. Each name felt heavier than the last. My son, my daughter-in-law, our trusted family physician, my business partner of 30 years, my closest friend, Mr. Caldwell, Wesley said quietly, pointing at the floor. Look, the thin layer of dust in the hidden room wasn't undisturbed. There were faint patterns, partial footprints smudged, as if someone had tried to erase them. Someone else knew about this space. Someone had been here before. A cold wave passed through me. That's why I mentioned calling the police, Wesley added. This feels wrong. Wrong was too small a word. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Dennis. His name glowed on the screen. I stared at it. I didn't answer. Wesley stepped back. I'll give you privacy. But be careful, Mr. Caldwell. Your wife went to great lengths to hide this. He left. The house fell silent. I stood in the gutted office holding my wife's secrets. I picked up the journal. The leather felt worn, familiar. I could almost see Josephine seated at her desk, pen moving steadily across the page. The first entry was dated March 2023, more than a year before she died. I opened it. Theodore, it began. My breath caught. If you're reading this, I'm already gone. And it wasn't an accident. The words blurred. The journal slipped from my hands and hit the floor. Outside, life carried on. A lawnmower droned somewhere down the street. A car door slammed. A dog barked. Ordinary sounds. But inside that office, the world had shifted. Not an accident. The phrase repeated in my mind. For 6 months, I had mourned what I believed was sudden and unavoidable. A tragic stroke. A medical event no one could predict. But she had known. She had prepared. She had hidden evidence inside the bones of our home. And she hadn't told me. I lowered myself into her desk chair. The cushion still held a faint indentation, as if she had just stepped away for a moment. I looked again at the folders. Dennis, my son, the boy who once fell asleep at this desk, while Josephine graded papers. The child she defended, encouraged, loved without condition. My chest tightened painfully. What had she discovered? Why had she hidden it? And why had someone else already been searching? The sunlight streaming through the window seemed too bright, too indifferent. I picked up the journal again, forcing myself to continue reading. Each word felt like stepping onto thin ice. I realized in that moment that my grief had only been the beginning. The stroke, the funeral, the casseroles and condolences, all of it had been a surface story. Beneath it lay something far darker. The room no longer felt like a place of memory. It felt like the scene of a crime waiting to be understood. And as I sat there, surrounded by torn walls and exposed secrets, one truth settled into my bones with chilling clarity. My wife hadn't just died. She had been preparing for something, and whatever she had uncovered was still very much alive. I turned the key in the office door and locked it behind me. The The click sounded louder than it should have, final deliberate. Outside, rain began to fall, light at first, then steady tapping against the window pane in a rhythm so familiar it made my chest ache. Josephine used to drum her fingers the same way when she was thinking through a problem, soft and thoughtful, like a private metronome. I crossed the room slowly and lowered myself into her chair. The air still carried a faint trace of her lavender perfume. Or maybe I only imagined it because I wanted to. The journal lay open where I had dropped it earlier. My hands trembled as I turned to the second page. The paper felt thinner than I remembered. Fragile, like the illusion I had been living in for the past 6 months. Every line of Josephine's handwriting felt intimate, careful, intentional. Words written in secret, hidden inside a wall, because she believed she might never get the chance to speak them aloud. The first dated entry appeared, March 15th, 2023. More than a year before she died. I leaned closer. I found discrepancies in the company accounts. Dennis has been moving money, large amounts. I need to investigate quietly. My breath caught so sharply it hurt. Dennis, our son. Josephine had suspected him over a year ago, and I had never known. She had carried that suspicion alone, protecting me from it, or perhaps protecting him. My pulse pounded in my ears as I turned the page. August the 3rd, 2023. I've been looking into Dennis's wife, Celeste. She isn't who she claims to be. Previous marriages, previous deaths. I'm frightened, but I need more proof. The rain intensified, drumming harder against the glass. The sound blurred with the roaring in my head. Previous marriages, previous deaths. Josephine had been afraid, and she hadn't told me. Why? Because she needed evidence. Because she wanted certainty. Because she didn't want to believe it either. I swallowed and flipped forward again. January 9th, 2024. I've been feeling ill. Nausea, hair loss, confusion. My vitamins taste different. Dr. Crane prescribed them. Sebastian introduced Dr. Crane to our family 10 years ago. Could there be a connection? Dr. Crane, Sebastian Langston. 2 names I had trusted without question. 2 men who had stood beside me at Josephine's funeral. My stomach turned. I turned another page. The handwriting had changed. Less steady. The loops uneven. The strokes heavier in some places, faint in others. February 18th, 2024. I confronted Celeste yesterday. She smiled at me and said, "You should be more careful, Josephine. I need to tell Theodore. But I need proof first." My fingers tightened on the paper. She had confronted her, alone. My wife had stood face to face with a woman she suspected of murder, and she had done it without telling me. The rain hammered harder, streaking the window with blurred silver lines. I could barely hear anything beyond the pounding of my own heart. I flipped to the final ink entry. March 28th, 2024. The handwriting was almost unrecognizable, jagged, uneven, as if written through fog. Worse today, can't think clearly. Saw lawyer. Safety deposit box. Forgive me, Theodore. Forgive me. The words felt like a knife sliding slowly into my ribs. That was the final entry in ink. But clipped to the last page was a small note written in pencil. The letters were larger than usual, shaky and uneven. USB drive. Listen. April 10th. April 10th, 2024. 2 days before she died. My hands moved mechanically. I retrieved the USB drive from the safe and inserted it into Josephine's old laptop, which still sat in the corner of her desk, exactly as she had left it. The screen flickered to life. One file, an audio recording. My throat closed as I clicked play. Static filled the room first, then her voice. Soft, thin, hoarse. "Theodore, if you're hearing this, I've run out of time." I pressed my hand over my mouth as tears flooded my vision. "Look at my medical records. Dr. Crane is lying. It wasn't a stroke. The symptoms, they're consistent with poisoning. Thallium, maybe. I don't know. But I know it wasn't natural." Her breathing sounded shallow, labored, and Sebastian. She continued, her voice trembling slightly. "Sebastian never forgave me for choosing you. I thought he had moved on. I was wrong. He introduced Crane to us. He loaned Dennis money when Dennis was desperate. He's been there in the background, Theodore, watching. A long pause. Rain battered the glass. I've left evidence with my lawyer, Lillian Prescott. She has instructions. If anything happens to me, she'll open a sealed file in April 2025. But I don't know if I'll make it that long. Her voice broke. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I wanted to be sure. I wanted to protect you. But now, I'm afraid I've waited too long. I heard her crying softly. Please, Theodore, protect yourself. Don't trust Dennis. Don't trust Celeste. And don't trust Sebastian. I love you. I will always love you. The recording ended. The room felt suffocatingly quiet. Only the rain remained. She had known. She had known she was being poisoned. She had known who was responsible, and she had tried to shield me from it. I sat there in the dark, her voice echoing in my mind. Not a stroke. Murder. The word formed slowly, heavily. Josephine had been murdered. I looked down at the journal and the folders spread across the desk. Dennis, Celeste, Dr. Crane, Sebastian, names that once represented safety. Now they felt like threats. She had stood between them and me, alone. Grief hit me with crushing force. I bent forward, pressing my hands against my face as sobs tore through my chest. For 6 months I had believed I was mourning a natural loss, but this was betrayal. Calculated, patient, intimate. I wiped my eyes roughly and reached for my phone. I needed help. The police. A lawyer. Someone with authority, someone who could navigate this nightmare. Before I could dial, headlights flashed across the office window. I froze. A car engine idled in the driveway. I looked at the clock on Josephine's desk. 8:47 p.m. Dennis and Celeste's weekly visit. They were early. My blood turned to ice. The journal lay open. The USB drive still connected. The folders exposed. If they saw this, if they realized I knew. Car doors slammed outside. Footsteps approached the porch. I had seconds. My hands moved frantically. I pulled the USB drive from the laptop, shut it down, shoved the journal back into the safe. I closed it, spun the lock, pushed the hidden panel into place, smoothing it with trembling palms. The folders, I swept them into Josephine's desk drawer and shut it hard. The doorbell rang. I forced myself to inhale slowly. Exhale. Fear could not show. Knowledge could not show. I unlocked the office door and walked down the hallway. The rain glistened on the porch light as I flipped it on. I opened the front door. Dennis stood there smiling awkwardly. Rain dripped from his jacket onto the porch. Celeste stood beside him, composed as ever. Her eyes were sharp, scanning, assessing. "Hey, Dad," Dennis said lightly. "Hope we're not too early." Every instinct in my body screamed to slam the door shut. Instead, I smiled. "Not at all," I said calmly. "Come in." And as they stepped past me into the house, I understood something with chilling clarity. They had no idea the wall had been opened. They had no idea I had heard Josephine's voice. And for the first time since she died, the advantage was mine. Celeste's expression softened, her eyes glistening just enough to pass for grief. If I hadn't known what I knew, if this had been yesterday or last week, I might have believed her. "We all miss her," she said quietly, her voice wrapped in sympathy. I nodded slowly, forcing my throat to work around the fury rising inside me. This woman, this predator, was standing in my living room beneath Josephine's wedding portrait, pretending to mourn the wife she had helped poison. "Can I get you anything?" I asked evenly. "Coffee." "That'd be great," Dennis replied, already stepping toward the kitchen behind me. I turned my back to them and walked away before my composure cracked. In the kitchen, I moved through the familiar motions, automatically grinding the beans, measuring the water, setting out 3 mugs from the cabinet Josephine had insisted on organizing by color. My hands functioned from muscle memory, but every nerve in my body was alive with alarm. "Run," something inside me whispered. But I couldn't, not yet, not without knowing what they were here for. Dennis leaned casually against the counter, arms folded. He looked tired. Or anxious. It was hard to tell the difference anymore, so he said lightly, as if we were discussing the weather. "The plumber. Everything okay with Mom's office?" I kept my face neutral, focusing on the hiss of the coffee machine. Just old pipes. You know how it is with these houses. He nodded but didn't look convinced. He had to open up the wall, right? Dennis continued, tone deceptively casual. Did he find anything, old documents? Maybe Mom kept a lot of papers in there. There it was. I turned slowly and met his eyes. My son, the boy I once taught to ride a bike in this very driveway. The teenager I helped practice handshake grips before his first internship interview. The man who may have stood by while his mother was poisoned. Nothing important, I said calmly. Just dust and spiders. Dennis's shoulders dropped a fraction. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. Relief. I poured the coffee into the mugs and carried them back to the living room. Celeste had made herself comfortable on the couch, one leg crossed elegantly over the other. She looked at home. Too at home. Theodore, she said as I handed her a mug. Have you given any more thought to updating your will? There it was again. Control disguised as concern. I know it's difficult. She continued smoothly, but after everything that happened, it's important to keep things organized. Dennis worries about you. I'm not planning to go anywhere. I replied with a faint smile. Of course not. She said, stirring her coffee slowly. But life is unpredictable. Accidents happen. The way she said it, calm, almost clinical, sent a cold wave through me. Dennis jumped in quickly. My friend Conrad Mercer, you remember him, Dad. He's a lawyer now. Estate planning, trusts, all that. He'd be happy to help. Conrad Mercer, another name from Josephine's journal. I'll think about it, I said. We sat in strained politeness for the next 20 minutes. Conversation drifted across neutral topics, neighborhood gossip, stock performance, minor repairs around the house. But beneath it, there was something sharper. Dennis kept steering us toward finances, the company, my retirement timeline, succession plans. Celeste barely spoke. She didn't need to. She was watching me, not openly, but I could feel it. Measuring my tone, my posture, my eye contact. When I excused myself to use the restroom, I walked down the hallway slowly, deliberately, and then I stopped. Voices carried faintly from the kitchen. I stood just beyond the doorway, hidden from view. Do you think he found it? Celeste's voice was low-edged with tension. If he did, we need to move faster. Dennis replied, the calm gone from his tone. Your window is closing. A pause. Then maybe it's time to... I flushed the toilet loudly. Let them hear me moving. Then I stepped back into the kitchen, adjusting my sleeve casually. They both looked up instantly, smiling. Everything okay, Dad? Dennis asked. Fine, I said. Just getting old. Celeste laughed lightly, pleasant, polished. They stayed another half hour. Dennis mentioned Conrad Mercer again before they left. Celeste touched my arm gently at the door, her fingers cool and precise. Take care of yourself, Theodore, she said. We worry about you. The performance was flawless. I stood on the porch and watched their car disappear down the wet street, red taillights fading into darkness. My son, my own son. I closed the door carefully, locked it, turned the deadbolt, slid the chain across. Then I leaned my forehead against the wood and stayed there, breathing slowly. Your window is closing. Maybe it's time to what? Finish what they started. The thought tightened my chest. I stepped away from the door and walked back into the living room. My hands were shaking again. I poured myself another whiskey and swallowed it in one burn. Josephine had known. She had known. She had tried to warn me, and I hadn't seen it. I had been too trusting, too blind. But not anymore. I reached for my phone, then stopped. What would I tell the police? That my son whispered something suspicious. That my dead wife left behind a journal. They would see an aging widower unraveling under grief. No, I needed more than suspicion. I needed undeniable proof. I set the phone down, and I started moving. Through the house. Window locks, door frames, back entrance, garage. Every latch, every hinge, every shadow. Josephine used to tease me about being paranoid when I double-checked the locks at night. But she had been careful too. She had paid attention. And that habit saved her at least long enough to leave evidence. That's when I noticed it. on the side table beside the couch where Celeste had been sitting. A decorative lamp. A Christmas gift from Dennis and Celeste last year. I picked it up slowly, turned it over, and saw it. A tiny lens embedded in the base, nearly invisible, no larger than a shirt button. Warm, recently active. My pulse spiked. They had been watching me inside my own home. For how long? Days, weeks, months. I placed the lamp down gently, careful not to disturb it further. My mind raced. That's why they came tonight. Not to check on me, to observe, to evaluate whether I had found anything behind that wall. They had been monitoring me, waiting for a reaction. My gaze swept across the room. The bookshelf Dennis assembled last summer. The smoke detector Celeste insisted on replacing. The picture frame they had adjusted during their last visit. How many devices were hidden in plain sight? How long had my home stopped being mine? I walked to the window and peered out into the dark. Rain streaked down the glass, distorting the empty street beyond. Somewhere out there, they were watching a live feed, waiting to see what I would do next, waiting to see if I panicked, if I called someone, if I searched frantically. I reached over and switched off the lamp. The room fell into shadow. Let them watch darkness. Let them think I was afraid. I stood there quietly, heart still pounding, mind sharpening. They had made one mistake. They underestimated me. And for the first time since Josephine died, I understood the rules of the game. I didn't move again for several minutes. Not until I was sure my breathing had steadied. Not until I was certain my face showed nothing but exhaustion. Then I sank into the armchair and waited. Because if they were watching, I would give them something to see. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a moment. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The ticking clock in the hallway, the hum of the refrigerator, the rain sliding down the gutters. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Josephine's voice replaying in my mind. Protect yourself. Don't trust them. By the time dawn bled pale light through the curtains, I had made my decision. At 7 sharp, I carried the hidden camera wrapped carefully in a kitchen towel to my car. The USB drive and Josephine's journal sat in a leather briefcase on the passenger seat. The engine started with a low rumble, and I backed out of the driveway without looking at the house. I couldn't bear to. At 8 o'clock, I was climbing 3 narrow flights of stairs in an aging brick building in downtown Portland. There was no elevator, just steep wooden steps worn smooth in the center from decades of foot traffic. The stairwell smelled faintly of stale coffee and paper-old files, old secrets. At the top landing, a frosted glass door bore faded gold lettering. Declan Foster, Private Investigations. I paused, inhaled, then knocked. Come in, a voice called. The office was modest, 1 metal desk, 2 plain chairs, a filing cabinet, and a window overlooking the street below. No unnecessary decor. No distractions. Just order. Declan Foster stood as I entered. Mid-40s, lean, alert. His eyes had the sharpness of someone trained to notice what others overlooked. A framed Portland police commendation hung behind him. Mr. Caldwell, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for seeing me so quickly, I replied. You sounded urgent. His handshake was steady, firm, but not overpowering. Have a seat. I lowered myself into the chair opposite his desk and placed the contents of my briefcase in front of him. The journal, the USB drive, and finally, the cloth-wrapped object. My wife died 6 months ago, I began. He didn't interrupt. The doctors said it was a stroke. But I found something hidden in our home, a concealed compartment she built behind her office wall. Inside was this journal, a recording, and evidence she believed she was being poisoned. Declan leaned forward slightly. Tell me everything. So I did. I described the hidden room, the safe, Josephine's journal entries documenting financial irregularities at our company, her suspicions about Dennis, her investigation into Celeste's past, the audio recording where she named Dr. Crane and Sebastian Langston. I told him about Dennis and Celeste's visit the night before, the questions about the plumber, the push to update my will, the whispering I overheard in the kitchen. If he found it, we need to move faster, I repeated. That's what she said. Declan's pen moved steadily across a leather notebook. And the camera, he asked. I unwrapped it and placed it in his palm. I found it in a lamp they gave me last Christmas. He examined it carefully, rotating it under the light. Miniature lens, he murmured. Likely wireless transmission. This wasn't installed by accident. They've been watching me. Yes, he said calmly. That's exactly what they've been doing. The matter-of-fact tone steadied me and terrified me at the same time. When I finished, Declan sat back and studied me for a long moment. Mr. Caldwell? He said finally, this doesn't sound like grief-induced paranoia. It sounds like coordination. The word hung in the air. Coordination. You may be in danger, he added. Hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way my own thoughts had not. Declan turned his monitor toward me. I ran a preliminary search this morning, he said. Your son has financial activity that raises serious questions. The screen filled with transaction logs, offshore accounts, transfers dating back roughly 3 years. They begin modestly, then escalate. The numbers were staggering, hundreds of thousands, then millions. I stared at the data as if it might rearrange itself into something innocent. And your daughter-in-law Declan continued clicking to another set of documents. Her background doesn't align with what she's presented. Archived news articles appeared. Valerie Whitman, Arizona, married in 2008. Husband died in a residential fire. Another article. Vivian Blackwood, Washington State. Husband died in a boating incident. Different names, different states, similar outcomes. There are patterns, Declan said. Insurance payouts. Identity shifts. My mouth went dry. She's done this before, I whispered. It appears so. And Dennis, I asked. Does he know? Declan met my gaze without hesitation. Your son is either manipulated or complicit. I don't know which yet. But either scenario places you at risk. The room felt smaller. The poisoning, I said slowly. Thallium. Josephine mentioned it. Declan nodded once. It's a method that can mimic natural illness. Without targeted testing, it can be missed, especially if the prescribing physician isn't searching for it. Dr. Crane's face flashed in my mind. Is that common, I asked? It's not common, but it's effective. Declan stood and walked to the window, pulling up additional footage on his computer. There's something else. Grainy traffic camera stills appeared. A dark sedan parked across from my house on multiple days. Different times. Same vehicle. Someone has been monitoring your residence, he said. For how long? Based on what I can access, at least 2 weeks. My pulse surged. This isn't casual observation, Declan added. This is structured. What do? I asked quietly. He turned to face me fully. First, you avoid confrontation. Second, you maintain normal behavior. Third, you don't return home without precautions. He sat down again. We need to secure you physically and digitally. We assess vulnerabilities. We determine how much access they've had. He tapped the camera gently. This is useful. It establishes intent. And the journal, I asked. It's significant, he replied. But personal notes alone won't sustain a criminal case. I nodded. I need proof, I said. Yes, he agreed. Financial documentation. Independent forensic analysis. Corroborating evidence. He paused. You mentioned a lawyer your wife trusted. Lillian Prescott. Declan wrote the name down carefully. If your wife left material with legal counsel, that could be crucial. He leaned back slightly. If she suspected she was in danger, she likely took additional steps. The rain outside streaked the window, blurring the city into gray motion. And if they're watching me, I asked. They may be evaluating your reactions, he said. Looking for panic. For impulsive decisions. I thought about the lamp. The darkness I had left behind. They won't get that, I said. Declan's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Good, he replied. He closed his notebook. We move carefully, he said. Methodically. I gathered Josephine's journal and slid it back into my briefcase. For months I had wandered in confusion, doubting my instincts. Now, sitting in that small office overlooking downtown Portland, something inside me steadied. Grief had shifted into awareness. Awareness into purpose. Declan extended his hand again. We'll take this one step at a time, he said. I shook it. Because whatever had begun with a hidden wall and a whispered warning was no longer just a mystery, it was a strategy. It took me a full day to find her, Josephine's college roommate, a woman I hadn't spoken to in years. Lillian Prescott, attorney at law with an office overlooking the Willamette River. When I stepped into her office that Thursday afternoon and saw the framed photograph on her desk, Josephine and Lillian laughing at a class reunion 10 years ago, I realized how much of my wife's inner world I had never known. Lillian stood to greet me. She was in her early 50s, sharp-eyed and composed, dressed in a charcoal blazer that spoke of quiet authority. But when she took my hand, her grip was warm. "Theodore," she said gently, "I've been waiting for this call. I just hoped it wouldn't come this soon." I sank into the chair across from her desk, exhausted. "You knew." "I knew Josephine was afraid," Lillian said, sitting down. "I didn't know how bad it was until it was too late." She gestured to the photograph. "Josephine and I reconnected about 5 years ago. We became close again. She trusted me. She never mentioned you," I said quietly. She wanted to protect you," Lillian replied. "The less you knew, the safer you were. Or so she thought." I pulled out Josephine's journal and set it on the desk. "She left me this, and a recording. She said you were her lawyer." Lillian nodded slowly. "She came to see me last year. She was terrified, Theodore. She discovered something about Dennis, about his wife, Celeste." I said the name, bitter on my tongue. "Yes." Lillian opened a file on her desk. "Josephine brought me documents, financial records, background checks she'd done herself. She was convinced Celeste was dangerous, and she believed Dennis was either being manipulated or was complicit." My throat tightened. "When did she come to you?" "The first time last March. But the last time—" Lillian paused, her expression pained. "A week before she died. She made an emergency appointment. She wanted to change her will immediately, remove Dennis entirely." The words hit me like a punch. "She was going to disinherit him." "Yes. She said she couldn't let him benefit from whatever was about to happen." I stared at her. She knew she was dying. Lillian's eyes filled with sorrow. "She showed me the symptoms, Theodore. Hair loss, confusion, nausea. She was certain she was being poisoned. Why didn't she go to the police?" My voice cracked. "Why didn't she tell me?" "She tried to tell you," Lillian said softly. "But you didn't see it. None of us did. And she was afraid that if she acted too soon, they'd cover their tracks. She needed proof. Ironclad proof. Did she get it?" Lillian reached into her filing cabinet and pulled out a thick envelope sealed with red wax. "She left me this. A sealed will. Instructions were very specific. It's not to be opened until 1 year after her death. April 2025. 6 more months." I leaned forward. "Why would she wait? She said if she acted too quickly, they'd know she was onto them. She needed time to gather everything: bank records, medical evidence, testimony. She wanted to make sure that when the truth came out, it would be undeniable." I looked at the envelope. Inside it, Josephine's final weapon. Evidence that could bring down Dennis, Celeste, Dr. Crane, Sebastian, all of them. But 6 months felt like an eternity. "There's more," Lillian said, her voice turning grim. She slid a stack of legal documents across the desk. I scanned the top page. My name. A petition filed with the county court. Petition for determination of incapacity and appointment of guardian. "What is this?" I whispered. 3 days ago. Lillian said, "Conrad Mercer filed a motion with the court. He's trying to have you declared legally incompetent." My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. Medical assessments. Statements from Dr. Malcolm Crane claiming I was suffering from dementia. Testimony from Dennis describing my erratic behavior since Josephine's death. And at the bottom, a signature. My signature, but I had never signed this document. They forged it. Lillian said, her jaw tight. They're claiming you requested Conrad Mercer as your legal guardian. If the court approves, this Dennis will control everything, your assets, your medical decisions, your life. I couldn't breathe. They're trying to erase me. Legally, yes, Lillian said. And once they have control, Theodore, you become a liability. Just like Josephine. The room spun. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about revenge. It was systematic. Calculated. They were going to take everything from me, and then... We fight back, Lillian said firmly. She opened her laptop and began typing. I'm filing a counter-motion today. I'll get an independent psychiatric evaluation to prove you're of sound mind. I'll challenge the forgery. And I'll request a restraining order to keep Dennis and Celeste away from you until this is resolved. Will it work? I asked. No, it'll buy us time, Lillian said. But Theodore, you need to understand this is going to get ugly. Conrad Mercer is good at what he does. And whoever's behind this has resources. Sebastian Langston, if Josephine was right about him, has connections. Money. Influence. I don't care, I said, my voice hard. They killed my wife. They're trying to kill me. I'm not going to let them win. Lillian's expression softened. Josephine said you'd say that. She reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. She loved you, Theodore. Everything she did, the journal, the will, the evidence, she did it to protect you. Now it's our job to finish what she started. I nodded, tears blurring my vision. What do we do next? Lillian pulled up a calendar. The competency hearing is scheduled for next week. I'll represent you. But in the meantime, you need to stay safe. Do you have somewhere secure to go? I'm working with a private investigator, I said. Declan Foster. Lillian's eyes lit with recognition. Former Portland PD, good man. Stay close to him. And don't go anywhere alone. If they're moving this fast, it means they're desperate. She handed me a business card with her direct number. Call me if anything happens. Day or night, I stood to leave. But Lillian's voice stopped me. Theodore! I turned back. They're not just after your money, she said quietly. They're trying to erase you legally before they finish what they started with Josephine. And if that sealed will get opened early, if they find out what Josephine left behind, they'll destroy it. We have to protect you. Starting now. I walked out of her office and into the gray Portland afternoon, the weight of Lillian's words pressing down on me. They were trying to take everything. My wife, my son, my freedom, my life. But Josephine had left me a weapon. And I wasn't going to let her down. The first strike didn't come with a masked intruder or a shattered window. It came at 6:47 on a Monday morning, silent, digital, precise. I was standing in my kitchen, waiting for the coffee to finish dripping, when my phone vibrated against the counter. A routine bank alert, I assumed. Ever since Josephine died, I'd kept notifications on for everything. I glanced down. Transaction alert, $50,000 transferred. Destination offshore account, Cayman Islands. Authorized by Theodore Caldwell. The room seemed to tilt. I hadn't authorized anything. My hand froze mid-air, still holding the coffee pot. I set it down carefully, as if sudden movement might make the notification disappear. Then I opened the banking app with fingers that no longer felt steady. There it was, $50,000. Gone. The timestamp read 6:32 a.m. 15 minutes ago. I had been in this kitchen alone. I dialed the bank immediately. After navigating automated menus and hold music that felt absurdly cheerful, a representative came on the line. Mr. Caldwell, how may I assist you? There's a wire transfer on my account, I said. $50,000. I didn't authorize it. She paused, keys clicking faintly in the background. Our system shows the transfer was approved with your signature and verified security credentials. I didn't approve it. I repeated each word, controlled. There was a brief silence. I can email you the authorization form, she offered. Do that. The document arrived less than a minute later. I opened it. There was my name at the bottom of a wire transfer request. My signature, except it wasn't. It was close. Close enough to fool someone who didn't know me. But I knew my own hand. The curve of the A in Caldwell was too tight. The loop on the F slightly narrow. A minor deviation, but after signing my name for 65 years, I recognized the difference instantly. "This is forged," I said, when the representative returned to the line. "I understand your concern, Mr. Caldwell. However, without a formal fraud determination, we cannot reverse the transaction immediately. You'll need to file a dispute. How long does that process take?" 4 to 6 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks. They weren't just stealing money. They were creating a record. I hung up. The rage inside me wasn't explosive, it was cold. Focused. My phone rang again almost immediately. "Dennis." I stared at his name before answering. "Hey, Dad," he said, his tone coated in concern. "The bank just called me. They've got me listed as your emergency contact. Everything okay?" I kept my voice level. "Fine, just handling something." "I heard about the transfer," he continued gently. "You've seemed overwhelmed lately. Are you sure you didn't authorize it and forget?" There it was. The suggestion. The seed. "I'm not confused," I said. "Of course not," Dennis replied quickly. "I just know Mom used to handle a lot of the financial details, and it's been hard since we lost her." He let the sentence trail off. "Maybe you just forgot. Maybe you're slipping." I tightened my grip on the phone. "Everything's under control. I just want to help," he said. "Maybe it's time we sat down with Conrad Mercer. Get your estate sorted out. Take the pressure off." "I'll consider it," I said. "Good. I'll check in later." The call ended. I stood alone in my kitchen. The attack had been precise. Financial destabilization. Psychological doubt. They were constructing a narrative. I called Declan. "They hit my bank account," I said without preamble. 50,000. Forged signature. "I was expecting escalation," he replied calmly. "They're building documentation. A pattern. Financial mismanagement. Confusion. It strengthens a case for incompetence. They're setting the stage. Yes. Can I prove the signature's fake? You can argue it. Forensic handwriting analysis helps, but legal proceedings take time, and they're trying to move faster than the courts. Time. That was their weapon." At noon, the next move arrived. A small package sat on my doorstep. No return address, just my name typed neatly. Postmarked downtown. Inside was a prescription bottle. My name printed on the label. Mild sedative. Take 1 tablet nightly as needed. Prescribed by Dr. Malcolm Crane. I hadn't seen Crane since the day he told me Josephine's death was natural. There was a folded note inside. "Theodore Dennis mentioned you've been under stress. These will help you sleep. Take 1 each night. Dr. Crane." I held the bottle up to the light. Small white tablets, unmarked. The implication was unmistakable. Chemical interference. I placed the bottle on the counter and stepped back from it. An hour later, my phone rang again. Conrad Mercer. "Mr. Caldwell?" He began smoothly. "I'd like to schedule a meeting regarding your estate documents." Dennis expressed concern. "I'm not interested," I said. "I understand this is a sensitive time," he continued, ignoring my refusal. "But given recent events, particularly the banking irregularities, it would be wise to ensure your affairs are properly structured." "There was no irregularity," I replied. "There was fraud." A pause. "That's a serious claim," Mercer said carefully. "Are you feeling well today?" The condescension was deliberate. I ended the call. They were tightening the circle. Financial manipulation, medical interference, legal pressure, 3 fronts in a coordinated campaign. By evening, exhaustion weighed on me like lead. I sat in the dim living room, the untouched pill bottle still on the kitchen counter, and tried to think through the fog of adrenaline. Then my phone rang again. "Declan, I had a lab-run analysis on the vitamin samples you brought me," he said. My pulse quickened, and thallium, he said. The word landed heavily. "High concentration. Chronic exposure. It aligns with the symptoms you described." My hands trembled. "They poisoned her," I whispered. "Yes." Silence stretched between us. "And Theodore," he continued, voice firm, "do not take those pills Crane sent you. I'd wager they contain compounds designed to impair cognition, memory lapses, disorientation. It would support the narrative they're building. They want me unstable. They want you declared incapable. I looked at the pill bottle again. The strategy was elegant. Slow poisoning. Financial misdirection. Documentation of confusion. Medical prescriptions reinforcing cognitive decline. All legal. All plausible. All devastating. They're trying to dismantle me piece by piece, I said. Yes. I leaned back in the chair. For months I had thought grief was the enemy. Now I understood. This was not grief. This was orchestration. And I was still alive. Which meant the game wasn't over. Not yet. Declan called me at midnight. I was already awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind churning through everything that had happened. So when my phone lit up the dark bedroom, I answered before the first ring finished. I found her, Declan said without preamble. Or rather, I found all three of her. His voice had that cold, professional edge cops use when the news is very bad. I sat up, heart pounding. What do you mean, three? Celeste Caldwell isn't her real name, Declan said. And she's done this before. Twice. I turned on the bedside lamp and reached for the notebook I'd been keeping, dates, names, everything Declan had uncovered. My hands shook as I wrote. I lifted prints from the wine glass she used at your house. Declan continued. Ran them through a contact at the bureau. It took some digging, but I got a hit. Multiple hits, actually. He paused, and I heard papers rustling. Identity 1, Valerie Whitman. Married to Spencer Reed, a tech consultant in Colorado, 2005 to 2008. Spencer died in a hiking accident at Rocky Mountain National Park. Fall from a cliff. The investigation was minimal, ruled accidental. Valerie collected an $800,000 life insurance payout and disappeared. My stomach turned. And the second, Identity 2, Vivian Blackwood. Married to Nolan Bennett, a real estate developer in California, 2008 to 2010. Nolan died in a boating accident on Lake Tahoe. Explosion. Faulty fuel line, according to the report. Vivian collected $1.5 million and vanished again. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. And then, Declan said, his voice hardening, she became Celeste. She showed up in Portland in 2014, spent 6 months researching your family before she accidentally met Dennis at a charity event in 2015. Researching us, I whispered. I found digital footprints, Theodore. She accessed public records, your business filings, property holdings, tax information. She knew exactly how much your family was worth before she ever shook Dennis's hand. I felt sick. So this was always the plan. She targeted us. Yes. And here's the part I can't figure out. Declan paused. When did Dennis realize what she was? Is he a victim who got in too deep, or was he complicit from the start? I didn't have an answer. I didn't know my own son anymore. There's more, Declan said. I'm sending you a photo. Look at it. My phone buzzed. I opened the image. It was a photograph from a charity gala. Dennis in a tuxedo, Celeste in a red dress, both smiling at the camera. The caption read, Portland Children's Hospital fundraiser, March 2015. Their first meeting. Look at the background, Declan said. I zoomed in. Behind Dennis and Celeste, partially obscured by other guests, stood a man in a dark suit. Sebastian Langston. He was watching them. He was there. I breathed. At their first meeting. Exactly, Declan said. Which means this wasn't just Celeste's plan. Sebastian was involved from the beginning. He introduced her to Dennis, or orchestrated the meeting. Either way, Theodore, this goes deeper than we thought. I stared at Sebastian's face in the photograph. My old friend. The man who had stood beside me at my wedding. Who had been Dennis's godfather. He had been planning this for nearly a decade. Kamata? I asked, my voice cracking. Why would he do this? I don't know yet, Declan said. But I'm going to find out. I set the phone down, my hands trembling. Josephine knew. She figured this out. She did. Declan said quietly. And Theodore, there's something else. I found Josephine's private investigation files buried in her computer, encrypted. She'd been digging into Celeste for months before she died. And there's a note dated February 2024. He read it aloud, confronted C today about her past. She knows that I know. The blood drained from my face. February 2024. That was when Josephine's symptoms started. The nausea, the hair loss, the confusion. She confronted Celeste, I whispered. And Celeste killed her. That's my assessment, Declan said. Josephine discovered the truth and Celeste moved fast. Dr. Crane ramped up the poisoning. By April, Josephine was gone. I pressed my hand over my mouth, fighting back the rage and grief threatening to choke me. My wife had been brave. So goddamn brave. She had faced down a killer to protect me, to protect our family. And it had cost her everything. Theodore, Declan's voice broke through the fog. Are you still with me? Yeah, I managed. I'm here. Good. Because we need to move carefully now. Celeste is dangerous. She's got a body count, and she's not going to stop. She's been planning this for years, and she's got Sebastian backing her. That means money, resources, connections. What do we do? I asked. We build the case, Declan said. I'm reaching out to investigators in Colorado and California, reopening questions about Spencer Reed and Nolan Bennett. If we can prove a pattern, we can bring this to the FBI. But it's going to take time. Well, how much time? A few weeks, maybe more. I don't have weeks, I said, my voice shaking. They're trying to get me declared incompetent. The hearing is next week. If they win, they won't, Declan said firmly. Lillian's on it, and I'm going to testify about the forged signatures, the surveillance, all of it. We're going to stop them, Theodore, but you need to stay alive long enough for us to do it. I looked around my dark bedroom, the house I'd shared with Josephine for 40 years. The place where we'd raised Dennis, where we'd been happy. Now it felt like a battlefield. I'll be careful, I said. Good. And Theodore, one more thing. What? Josephine left those files for you. She wanted you to find them. She knew you'd figure it out. She trusted you to finish what she started. I closed my eyes, tears sliding down my face. I won't let her down, I whispered. I know you won't, Declan said. Get some sleep, I'll call you tomorrow. He hung up. I sat alone in the dark. Josephine's words echoing in my head. She knows that I know. Celeste had killed my wife because Josephine had discovered the truth. And now I knew the truth too, which meant I was next. Saturday afternoon found me back in Declan Foster's office. The rain streaking down the narrow window while decades of my life lay scattered across his desk in neat, devastating rows. Old photographs, financial statements, phone logs, corporate filings. It looked less like a private investigator's workspace and more like a courtroom exhibit evidence arranged for a jury. Except the crime wasn't a single act. It was my entire life carefully dismantled. Declan stood across from me, sleeves rolled up, expression focused. He had arranged the documents in chronological order, forming a timeline that stretched from the 1960s to the present. Start at the beginning, I said quietly. He nodded and slid a worn college yearbook toward me. University of Oregon, 1963 to 1965. The cover was faded, the edges softened by time. I opened it with unsteady hands. There they were, Josephine and Sebastian, young, laughing, captured in black and white. She was leaning slightly toward him, her expression open and radiant. His hand rested at the small of her back. They were together for 2 years, Declan said gently. Several people I interviewed from that period said Sebastian intended to propose in the summer of 1966. My throat tightened. She never told me, I whispered. Declan met my gaze. She didn't want to burden you with old history. But that same summer, she attended a friend's wedding. I remembered that wedding as vividly as if it were yesterday. The string quartet near the garden fountain. The way Josephine laughed when I misstepped during the first dance. The sudden electric certainty that I had just met the woman I would marry. That's where she met you, Declan said. And she chose you. I looked down at the photograph again. She chose me, I repeated. And Sebastian never accepted it. Declan slid another document across the desk, a business registration from Seattle dated 1967. Sebastian left Oregon shortly after he continued. Built a technology and commercial real estate portfolio. Made substantial money. But he never married. Relationships were brief. Every woman he dated bore a resemblance to Josephine. A chill crept up my spine. This wasn't forgotten, Declan said quietly. It was postponed. He added another layer to the timeline. Sebastian returns to Oregon, Declan said. Reaches out to you. Suggests a business partnership. I nodded slowly. He said he missed his old friends. Wanted to rebuild bridges. He wanted proximity, Declan corrected. The word struck me hard. Proximity? From that point forward, Declan continued spreading out financial documents. He inserted himself into every significant decision you made. Investments, acquisitions, board appointments. I scanned the pages. Sebastian's name appeared everywhere. Consultant, advisor, silent partner. He nudged you toward high-risk ventures, Declan said. Introduced you to intermediaries who were financially dependent on him. Ensured he had leverage. He was my friend, I said hollowly. My son's godfather. And that was strategic, Declan replied. Another file appeared. This is when Sebastian introduced Dr. Malcolm Crane to your family, Declan said. Crane had outstanding gambling debts, nearly $100,000. Sebastian cleared them. In exchange, I asked. In exchange, Crane became compliant. The implications settled like a weight on my chest. Declan tapped another entry. The charity gala where Dennis met Celeste. Sebastian organized the guest list. I closed my eyes briefly. He brought her into our lives. Yes, a loan agreement. $300,000 transferred to Dennis for a commercial real estate investment. It failed, I said quietly. Likely by design, Declan replied. Dennis couldn't repay Sebastian. From that moment, your son was financially bound. I felt something fracture inside me. He used my son, I whispered. For leverage. Declan's voice remained calm, but I could hear the undercurrent of anger beneath it. This wasn't spontaneous, he continued. It was a long-term operation. 4 decades of patience. The room felt colder. There's more, Declan said softly. How can there be more? I asked, my voice thin. He pulled a police report from a separate folder. April 12, 2024. The day Josephine died. You were at the office that morning, Declan said. Yes. Dennis placed a 911 call at 10:47 a.m., reporting that Josephine had collapsed. I remembered the frantic call from my son. The drive home. The flashing lights. But look here, Declan said, pointing to an earlier entry. 10:39 a.m. 911 call from Sebastian Langston's mobile phone. Reporting an unresponsive female at your address. I stared at the timestamp. 8 minutes earlier, Declan said quietly. My pulse thundered in my ears. He was there, I breathed. Yes. Before Dennis. Yes. The room seemed to tilt. He called first, I repeated, struggling to process it. Declan leaned forward slightly. I believe Sebastian administered the final dose, he said carefully. Then he placed the call to control the narrative. Ensure paramedics responded under the right description. Ensure doctor. Crane was notified. Images flashed in my mind. The hospital corridor. Sebastian's hand on my shoulder. Theodore, she went peacefully, he had said. Crane says the stroke was severe. He had guided me through my grief, positioned himself as support, and I had trusted him. I rose abruptly and walked to the window, staring at the gray Portland skyline. Sebastian, the man who stood beside me at my wedding, who toasted our 25th anniversary, who held Dennis as an infant. He hadn't simply attended Josephine's funeral. He had orchestrated it. He gave the eulogy, I said quietly. He spoke about loyalty, about friendship. Declan's jaw tightened. This wasn't about money, he said. Money was leverage. This was about loss. You married the woman he loved, and instead of moving on, he waited. 40 years. Waiting, I sank back into the chair, the timeline stretching before me like a map of betrayal. He dismantled everything I whispered. Piece by piece, Declan confirmed. Your business stability, your son's independence, your wife's health, and now your credibility. The pattern was undeniable. He'll target me next, I said. Declan didn't hesitate. Yes. I looked again at the photograph from the yearbook. Josephine's smile, Sebastian's possessive stance. She chose me, I said almost to myself. And he never forgave her, Declan replied. Silence filled the office. 40 years of calculated resentment. 40 years of patient revenge. The rain continued outside, steady and indifferent. I traced my finger along the edge of the old photograph. She chose me, I repeated, stronger this time. And for that choice. He had spent a lifetime trying to erase us. Thursday morning arrived with deceptive brightness. Clear blue skies, golden autumn leaves, the kind of day that makes you believe nothing bad could possibly happen. I was wrong. I was driving to meet Lillian at her office downtown to discuss the competency hearing scheduled for next week. The route took me east along Dashit 84 through the Columbia River Gorge, one of the most beautiful drives in Oregon, with sweeping views of the river below and cliffs rising on either side. Traffic was light. I had the windows cracked, letting in the cool autumn air, and I was thinking about Josephine's sealed will. 6 more months until it could be opened. 6 months of walking this tightrope between investigation and survival. That's when it happened. I approached a downhill curve near mile marker 47. The speed limit dropped to 55, and I pressed the brake pedal to slow down. Nothing. My heart lurched. I pressed again, harder this time. The pedal sank to the floor with no resistance, no friction, nothing. I was still accelerating. 45 miles per hour. 50. 55. The curve was coming up fast, and beyond the guardrail, the ground dropped away into a 60-meter ravine. No, no, no! I pumped the brakes again. Still nothing. A semi-truck appeared ahead in my lane, brake lights flashing red. I jerked the wheel, swerving into the next lane. A horn blared as I barely missed clipping a sedan. 60 miles per hour now, the engine screaming as the downhill slope pulled me faster. The curve ahead was sharp, almost 90 degrees. If I hit it at this speed, I didn't let myself finish the thought. Options. I needed options. The emergency brake. I yanked the handle hard. The rear wheels locked, and the car shuddered violently, fishtailing across the lane. The smell of burning rubber filled the air, but I was still going too fast. The curve was right there, guardrail, cliff, river far below. One chance. I aimed for the guardrail at an angle, praying the metal would slow me down instead of launching me over the edge. The impact was catastrophic. Metal shrieked. Glass shattered. The airbag exploded into my face, slamming my head back against the seat. The car ground along the guardrail, sparks flying, the world spinning in a chaos of sound and pain, and then silence. I sat there gasping, the airbag deflating in my lap. My hands were still gripping the wheel knuckles, white. I was alive. Slowly, I turned my head. The guardrail was crumpled, bent inward from the impact. Beyond it, the cliff dropped away into nothing. I was 6 meters from the edge. 6 meters. My hands started shaking, then my arms, then my whole body. I fumbled for my seatbelt, unclipped it, and shoved the door open. My legs barely held me as I stumbled out onto the shoulder. A highway patrol car pulled up within minutes, lights flashing. The officer Anderson, according to his name tag, climbed out and jogged over. "Sir, are you injured?" I don't think so," I managed. "What happened?" "My brakes failed," I said, my voice shaking. I couldn't stop. Officer Anderson walked to the front of my car, inspecting the damage. "Old car, old brakes. Happens sometimes, especially on a downhill grade." "No," I said louder than I intended. "It wasn't like that. It just stopped working. Completely." Anderson gave me the look cops give people in shock. "We'll have the vehicle towed and inspected. But honestly, sir, it looks like equipment failure. You're lucky you didn't go over. Lucky." I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and called Declan. Theodore, what's wrong?" My brakes failed, I said. On the gorge. Declan, I almost... Where are you? The mile marker 47, eastbound. I'm on my way. Don't let them tow the car until I get there. He hung up. Officer Anderson was filling out an incident report when Declan's truck pulled up 20 minutes later. Declan climbed out, his expression grim. Mr. Foster, Anderson said. Friend of yours. Former Portland PD. Declan said, flashing his old badge. Mind if I take a look at the vehicle? Anderson shrugged. Be my guest. Declan crouched beside my car and peered underneath. I watched his face darken. He stood and gestured for me to come closer. Then he pointed. See this, he said quietly, indicating a brake line. That's been cut. Partially severed so it would hold until you hit the brakes hard. Then it would rupture completely. My stomach dropped. Cut! Professionally, Declan said. This wasn't an accident, Theodore. Someone tried to kill you. Officer Anderson walked over. What are you two looking at? Declan straightened. Officer, this brake line was tampered with. This is an attempted homicide. Anderson's expression shifted from skepticism to concern. He crouched down, examined the line, and swore under his breath. I'll call it in, he said. We'll need the vehicle impounded as evidence. While Anderson radioed for a detective, I stood on the shoulder of the highway watching semi-trucks roar past, the wind from their passage buffeting me. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I opened the text message. Accidents happen to careless old men. Stop digging. My blood turned to ice. I showed Declan. His jaw tightened. They're escalating, he said. Financial manipulation didn't work. Legal pressure didn't work. So now they're trying to kill you outright. What do? I whispered. You don't go anywhere alone, Declan said. And we move faster. I'm calling the FBI. This just became a federal case. By the time the tow truck arrived and took my mangled car away, it was past noon. Declan drove me home in silence, both of us processing what had just happened. When we pulled into my driveway, he put the truck in park and turned to me. Who's Theodore? You can't stay here alone anymore. They know where you live. They've been inside your house. They tampered with your car while it was parked in your garage. I know, I said quietly. I'm staying with you tonight, Declan said. And we're getting you out of here tomorrow. Safe house, somewhere they can't find you. I wanted to argue, to say I could handle this myself, but I was exhausted and terrified. Okay, I whispered. Declan nodded. Good. Now let's get inside. And Theodore, I looked at him. We're going to catch them. All of them. I promise you that. I believed him. But as I walked into my house, the house I'd shared with Josephine for 40 years, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap. 1 week after someone tried to kill me on the highway, my son invited me to dinner. I knew I shouldn't go, but I went anyway. Dennis called on Tuesday, his voice thick with what sounded like regret. Dad, I know things have been tense. Can we talk just dinner at our place Thursday night? Please. Lillian told me not to go. Declan told me it was a trap. But part of me, the part that remembered teaching Dennis to ride a bike, the part that had held him when he was born, still wanted to believe my son wasn't trying to kill me. Okay, I said. Thursday. Declan insisted I wear a wire. A tiny recording device taped to my chest, hidden under my shirt. If they say anything incriminating, he said, we'll have it on tape. In Thursday, 7:00 p.m., I pulled up to Dennis and Celeste's apartment building, a sleek, modern high-rise downtown, all glass and steel. Nothing like the warm, cluttered home Josephine and I had raised him in. Dennis met me at the door with a hug that felt too tight, too rehearsed. Dad, thanks for coming. Celeste appeared behind him, smiling. Theodore, we're so glad you're here. Something was wrong. The air felt too still, too careful. The living room was immaculate white furniture, abstract art, not a single photograph. No trace of the family Dennis had come from. Celeste poured wine. I took the glass, but barely sipped. They didn't seem to notice. And we wanted to talk, Dennis said, settling onto the couch. About everything that's happened. The misunderstandings. Misunderstandings. I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. The bank thing, Dennis continued. Dad, I swear I thought you'd authorized that transfer. I was trying to help by moving $50,000 to an offshore account. Dennis's smile faltered. It was an investment opportunity. I wanted to include you, without asking me first. Celeste cut in smoothly. Theodore, we know you've been under a lot of stress since Josephine passed. Grief can make things confusing. We just want to help. There it was again. The gaslighting. Making me question my own reality. I forced a smile. I appreciate the concern. Dinner's ready, Celeste announced, standing. I made your favorite. Well, Josephine's favorite. My stomach turned. Coq au vin. Chicken braised in red wine. The dish Josephine used to make on special occasions. The irony wasn't lost on me. We sat at the dining table, too formal, too staged. Celeste served the plates herself, her hands graceful and deliberate. I watched her closely. Did she add something? A sprinkle of powder, a few drops from a vial? I couldn't tell. Eat, Dad, Dennis urged. Celeste worked all day on this. I took a small bite. It tasted fine, rich, savory, nothing obviously wrong. But I didn't trust it. I pushed the food around my plate, taking tiny portions, chewing slowly. When they weren't looking, I slipped a piece of chicken into my napkin. Not hungry, Celeste asked, her eyes sharp. Doctor told me to eat light, I said. Stomach hasn't been the same since the accident. That must have been terrifying, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Brake failure, so random. I met her eyes. Yes, random. Dennis steered the conversation back to safer territory, weather, holidays, neutral topics. But every few minutes, he'd circle back. Hi, Dad, you really should meet with Conrad Mercer. He's the best estate lawyer in Portland. He could help you avoid complications. I have a lawyer, I said. Lillian Prescott. Celeste's smile was razor sharp. She's competent, but Conrad has connections, resources. I'm sure he does, I said. By 9:30, I'd had enough. I stood, thanked them for dinner, and made my excuses. Dennis walked me to the door. Think about what we said, Dad. We're family. We're on your side. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As I drove home, I felt a strange sense of victory. I'd made it through. I'd recorded the conversation. I'd avoided eating most of the food. I'd won. At 11:45 p.m., I woke up in agony. The pains started in my stomach, sharp, burning, twisting. I stumbled out of bed, barely making it to the bathroom before I vomited violently. My vision blurred. The room spun. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, but my hands wouldn't cooperate. My fingers felt numb, useless. I collapsed onto the tile floor, gasping. I tried to shout, but it came out as a whisper. Footsteps pounded down the hall. The bathroom door flew open. Theodore Declan dropped to his knees beside me. Jesus, hang on. He pulled out his phone, dialed 911, and scooped me up like I weighed nothing. The drive to the hospital was a blur of streetlights and pain. Providence Portland Medical Center. Emergency room. The fluorescent lights were too bright. Voices swirled around me, nurses, doctors, someone asking questions I couldn't answer. A woman in scrubs leaned over me. Mr. Caldwell, I'm Dr. Helena Cross. Can you hear me? I nodded weakly. We're running a blood panel, just hold on. Time fractured. Minutes felt like hours. Dr. Cross came back, her face grim. Mr. Caldwell, there's thallium in your system. Someone poisoned you. I laughed, a bitter, broken sound, and immediately regretted it as my stomach clenched. Same thing, I rasped. That killed my wife. Dr. Cross's expression hardened. We're calling the police. This is a criminal matter. 2 detectives showed up at 3 a.m. They took my statement, then left to interview Dennis and Celeste. Declan stayed with me, his face tight with fury. They got you. Even with all our precautions, they got you. Not enough to kill me, I said weakly. Not yet, Declan said. But Theodore, they're not going to stop. An hour later, the detectives returned. We questioned your son and daughter-in-law, one of them said. They're claiming you must have eaten something earlier in the day. They said the meal was fine, they ate the same food. They're lying, I said. We searched their apartment. No thallium, no poison, no evidence. Of course not, I said bitterly. They're professionals. The detective hesitated. Mr. Caldwell, without physical evidence, we can't make an arrest. It's your word against theirs. Before I could respond, Conrad Mercer arrived, slick, composed, carrying a briefcase like a weapon. On detectives, he said smoothly. My clients are devastated by this unfortunate food poisoning incident. They're cooperating fully. But I trust you're not accusing them of anything without evidence. The detectives exchanged glances. No charges at this time. Mercer nodded. Good. If there's nothing else, my clients would like to go home. This has been very traumatic for them. And just like that, it was over. No arrests, no consequences. I lay in the hospital bed, an IV in my arm, pumping fluids and collating agents to flush the poison from my system. Declan sat beside me, silent and furious. They tried to finish what they started with Josephine, I whispered. I know, Declan said, and they're going to try again. I know, he said again. But Theodore, next time they're going to have to go through me first. I closed my eyes, exhausted and defeated. They'd poisoned me in my own son's home, and there was nothing I could do about it. 2 weeks later, I stood inside a county courthouse and watched my own son attempt to have me declared legally incompetent. If someone had described this scene to me a year ago, I would have laughed. Or worse, I would have assumed they were speaking about another family, one fractured beyond recognition. But here I was. The courtroom was nothing like the grand halls depicted in films. It was compact. Almost claustrophobic wood-paneled walls dulled by decades of hearings, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and the faint scent of paper varnish and anxiety lingering in the air. Every bench carried the weight of other families' tragedies. Dennis sat at the petitioner's table beside Conrad Mercer. He stared down at his clasped hands, jaw tight, refusing to meet my eyes. I searched his face for hesitation, for doubt, for any sign of the boy I once carried on my shoulders. I found none. Lillian Prescott sat beside me, composed and alert, legal pad, open pen poised. Her posture radiated readiness. She had prepared meticulously. Unlike me, she wasn't surprised by betrayal anymore. Judge Dorothy Lang presided from the bench, late 60s, sharp-eyed silver hair, pulled into a severe bun. She had the presence of someone who had seen every form of human deception and grown unimpressed by all of them. We are here, she began, evenly to determine whether Theodore Caldwell retains the mental capacity to manage his personal and financial affairs. Mr. Mercer, you may proceed. Conrad rose smoothly, adjusting his cufflinks with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Your Honor, he began, Mr. Caldwell has demonstrated clear signs of cognitive deterioration over the past 18 months. His declining mental state has resulted in financial misjudgments, paranoia, and impaired reasoning. He clicked a remote. A video appeared on the screen. It was me, in my kitchen, unsteady, knocking over a glass, pausing as if unsure of what I had been doing. A low murmur drifted through the gallery. For a split second, I barely recognized myself. Then memory returned, the fog, the confusion, the medication I had unknowingly been taking. As you can see, Mercer continued smoothly, Mr. Caldwell exhibits disorientation and compromised motor coordination. The performance was seamless. Next, he called Dr. Malcolm Crane. I watched the man who had overseen Josephine's stroke step into the witness box and swear to tell the truth. Dr. Crane. Mercer began, How long have you treated Mr. Caldwell? Approximately 10 years, Crane replied with professional calm. And in your medical opinion? Crane folded his hands. Mr. Caldwell presents with symptoms consistent with early-stage dementia, memory lapses, confusion, paranoia. I have documented these changes progressively. He spoke like a textbook, measured, authoritative, calculated. Mercer then presented financial documents, the $50,000 offshore transfer prominently displayed. Reckless decision-making, Mercer declared. Clear evidence of compromised judgment. Then came the moment I dreaded. Mr. Dennis Caldwell, Mercer said. My son stood. He walked to the witness box with deliberate steps, placed his hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Describe your father's recent behavior, Mercer prompted gently. Dennis swallowed. He's not the same, he said quietly. He forgets things. He makes accusations that don't make sense. Since Mom passed, he's been unstable. Each word felt like a knife pressed carefully between my ribs. Was he lying knowingly? Or had Sebastian shaped his perception so completely that he believed this narrative? Lillian rose for cross-examination. Mr. Caldwell, she said crisply, you currently owe your father's company approximately $2 million. Is that correct? Dennis flinched. That's unrelated. Answer the question. Yes, he admitted. And if your father were declared incompetent and you appointed guardian, you would gain control over that debt. Correct. Objection, Mercer interjected. Motive, Lillian replied evenly. Judge Lang nodded. Overruled. Dennis hesitated. Yes, but that's not why. Of course, Lillian interrupted softly. She let the silence settle before returning to her seat. After arguments concluded, Judge Lang called a brief recess. In the hallway, my hands trembled despite my effort to steady them. They're going to convince her, I murmured. They won't, Lillian said firmly. Not with what we have. When court resumed, Lillian stood again. Your Honor, the defense presents rebuttal evidence. She introduced an independent neuropsychological evaluation conducted by Dr. Samuel Rhodes, unaffiliated with any party involved. Dr. Rhodes concludes that Mr. Caldwell demonstrates no cognitive impairment. His executive functioning, memory, and reasoning remain intact. Copies were handed forward. Then came the forensic handwriting analysis. The signature authorizing the $50,000 transfer, Lillian stated, has been confirmed as a forgery by a certified document examiner. Mercer shifted in his seat. Furthermore, Lillian continued, Dr. Crane's own historical notes describe Mr. Caldwell as mentally sharp. Only after certain medications were introduced did alleged symptoms appear. Judge Lang leaned forward slightly. Counsel, are you suggesting malpractice? I am suggesting, Lillian said carefully, that the symptoms presented to this court have an alternative cause. Then she delivered the final piece. Your Honor, we submit an audio recording made by Josephine Caldwell 2 days before her death. The courtroom fell utterly silent. Josephine's voice filled the room, fragile but unmistakable. If Theodore is ever declared incompetent after I'm gone, it's a lie. My husband is of sound mind. If anyone attempts to control him legally, look to our son and his wife. My vision blurred as tears slid down my face. Dennis's expression drained of color. Mercer's composure cracked just slightly. Judge Lang listened without expression. When the recording ended, the quiet felt heavy enough to fracture. Anything further, she asked. No, Your Honor. Judge Lang folded her hands. The petition is denied, she said clearly. Mr. Theodore Caldwell is fully competent to manage his affairs. Relief surged through me, but she wasn't finished. This court is also referring this matter for investigation into potential elder exploitation and fraudulent conduct. Attempts to strip competent individuals of their rights through fabricated evidence will not be tolerated. Dennis looked as though the air had been sucked from the room. Mercer rose abruptly. Your Honor. Sit down, Judge Lang said sharply. This hearing is concluded. The gavel struck. It was over. Outside, the courthouse steps felt almost unreal beneath my feet. You prevailed, Lillian said, squeezing my hand. We did, I replied quietly. As we walked toward the parking lot, a familiar figure caught my eye. Sebastian Langston leaned casually against his car, hands in his coat pockets, watching us with unsettling calm. He wasn't furious. He wasn't rattled. He was smiling. As we approached, he straightened and stepped forward. Theodore, he said smoothly, that was impressive. Truly. I stopped several feet away. You've underestimated him, Lillian murmured quietly. Josephine always believed in your resilience, Sebastian continued softly. She prepared you well. My fists clenched at my sides. We should speak privately, Sebastian said. Declan stepped between us instantly. That's not happening. Sebastian lifted his hands slightly, feigning innocence. I'm not here to threaten anyone, he said. I'm here to offer an arrangement. I don't negotiate with murderers, I replied. His smile widened, thin and knowing. Not even he asked quietly if it means staying alive. Sebastian chose the meeting place carefully. Waterfront Park, the same stretch of riverbank, where 3 decades earlier he had reappeared in my life with a smile and an outstretched hand. The place where we'd sat on a weathered wooden bench and talked about second chances, about rebuilding old friendships, about letting the past stay buried. Nothing about that friendship had been real. When he texted the location, I agreed. But I didn't go alone. Declan insisted on distance 50 meters, maybe a little more far enough, to avoid suspicion, close enough to capture every word through a directional mic. He'd position himself near a cluster of trees, camera-steady lens trained on us. If Sebastian was going to talk, we were going to let him. The afternoon was sharp with autumn cold. A gray sky pressed low over the Willamette River, the water dark and restless as it churned past the banks. Fallen leaves skittered across the paved path like restless thoughts. Sebastian was already there when I arrived. He sat on our bench, the one where we had toasted new ventures with cheap coffee, argued over investments, mourned Josephine together after her funeral, or rather, where I thought we had mourned together. He looked composed, relaxed. Hands folded loosely over his knee coat, buttoned neatly, as though this were any ordinary meeting between old friends. I approached slowly and sat down, leaving deliberate space between us. Theodore, he said smoothly, turning his head toward me with that familiar half-smile. You handled yourself well in court today. Lillian Prescott is formidable. I didn't respond to the compliment. I know, I said instead. I know everything. His smile didn't falter. Everything, he echoed lightly. That's an ambitious claim. What exactly do you believe you know? I met his eyes directly. You and Josephine, I said. The relationship in college. The breakup. You never forgave her. You never forgave me. Dr. Crane. Celeste. The loan to Dennis. The staged financial failures. You orchestrated it all. The wind lifted briefly off the river, tugging at his coat collar. Sebastian leaned back, resting one arm along the bench, almost at ease. Josephine and I were meant to build a life together, he said quietly. She was brilliant, beautiful, extraordinary. And she chose. His eyes flicked over me. You, a medical supply salesman with decent timing. The words were delivered softly, but the contempt beneath them was unmistakable. I left Oregon, he continued. Built something real in Seattle. Real estate, technology, influence. I made more money than either of us ever imagined. His gaze drifted toward the river, and yet he added every milestone felt incomplete. Because she wasn't beside me. You came back, I said. Yes, he agreed. I came back. To reconnect, I asked, though I already knew the answer. To position myself, he corrected. A faint smile touched his lips. Patience, Theodore, he went on. You've never understood it. You rushed into marriage, into business deals, into trust. I, on the other hand, waited. Waited for what? For the right moment, he said simply. My fists tightened against my thighs. Did you kill her, I asked. He tilted his head slightly, as though considering a philosophical puzzle. Josephine made a choice 40 years ago, he said slowly. We all live with the consequences of our decisions. Some consequences just take longer to unfold. It wasn't a confession, not in legal terms, but it was enough to chill my blood. You introduced Crane. I said, my voice trembling despite my effort to steady it. You cleared his debts. You put him in our lives. Yes, you lent Dennis money knowing he'd fail. I offered assistance. You brought Celeste to that gala. I expanded your family's social circle. Every word was calculated. You can't prove it. He turned fully toward me now. Do you have any idea? He asked, his tone sharpening. What it feels like to attend the wedding of the woman you love and applaud as she marries someone else. To stand at your best friend's side and smile while everything you wanted slips away. So you decided to destroy us, I said. He shook his head slightly. Destroy is crude. I prefer balance. Josephine chose you. So I ensured that eventually you would lose what she gave you. My son, I asked. Influence, he corrected. My company, reallocation. My peace. He didn't answer that one. And eventually he continued, voice softening again, you. The casual certainty with which he spoke made the river feel colder. You won't get away with it, I said. He laughed quietly. Theodore, I've already gotten away with it. You won a courtroom exchange today. Congratulations. But court victories don't undo decades of groundwork. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of damp leaves. You should reconcile with Dennis, Sebastian added. Life is fragile at our age. Stress is unkind to the heart. The threat was almost polite. What do you want? I demanded. He studied me carefully. I want you to understand, he said at last. I want you to know that every sleepless night, every doubt about your own mind, every fracture in your family that was intentional. I want you to carry that awareness with you. He rose slowly, brushing imaginary dust from his coat. Knowledge, he said, is the only thing I can give you freely. I stood as well, legs unsteady from a mixture of anger and disbelief. You're sick, I said. No, he replied calmly. I'm disciplined. He began to walk away, then paused. One more thing, he said without turning. I waited. Josephine called your name at the end, he continued. Even knowing what was happening, even seeing me there, my breath caught. You were there, I said. He turned halfway, the faintest smile curving his lips. She should have chosen me, he said quietly. 40 years ago. That was the original mistake. The implication hung in the air like frost. She didn't, I said. No, he agreed. And because she didn't, I ensured the universe corrected itself. There were no witnesses near enough to hear clearly. No device on my person. Just the river, the wind, and his words. Enjoy your small triumph, he said. But remember, victories fade. Consequences endure. Then he walked away, unhurried hands tucked into his pockets, as though we had just concluded a casual business discussion. I remained where I was, staring at the water. For a moment I felt hollow. Then my phone vibrated. A message from Declan. Got everything on video. Audio's clean. Another line appeared almost immediately. But there's more. Sebastian's moved substantial funds offshore in the past 48 hours. And I intercepted encrypted communication indicating he's engaged someone. We need to relocate you. Tonight. The river churned beside me, relentless and dark. Sebastian believed patience made him untouchable, but patience cuts both ways, and this time, he wasn't the only one prepared. Declan insisted on staying at my house that night. I didn't argue. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I understood why. The sound woke me, or rather, the near absence of sound. A soft click from downstairs. I lay frozen in bed, listening. Another sound, careful footsteps on the hardwood floor. Someone was inside my house. My heart hammered against my ribs. I reached slowly for my phone on the nightstand, keeping my breathing steady. Declan had installed a security system after the break incident. Why hadn't the alarm gone off? Then I heard Declan's voice, sharp and commanding. Stop right there. Police. Hands where I can see them. A scuffle erupted downstairs, furniture scraping a grunt of pain, the heavy thud of bodies hitting the floor. I grabbed the baseball bat from my closet. Josephine had always insisted I keep something for self-defense, and crept to the bedroom door. My hands shook as I eased it open, voices below. Declan calm but firm. Don't move. I said don't move. I descended the stairs, bat raised, and found Declan kneeling on a man's back, pinning him face down on my living room floor. The intruder was in his early 30s, athletic build, dressed head to toe in black. Professional. Theodore, Declan said without looking up. Call 911. Don't touch anything. I dialed with trembling fingers, my eyes locked on the intruder. On the coffee table beside them, a set of lockpicks, a suppressed handgun, and a small syringe. 911, what's your emergency? There's an intruder in my home, I said, my voice shaking. He's been subdued. We need police at 428 Hawthorne Drive. Officers are on the way. Are you injured? No, but he has a weapon. Within 5 minutes, sirens wailed outside. Portland PD flooded my house. 3 patrol officers followed shortly by 2 detectives. Declan identified himself, flashing his old badge. Former Portland PD. I was staying with Mr. Caldwell for his protection. This man broke in through the back door. I apprehended him before he reached the bedroom. The lead detective, a woman in her 40s named Reyes, examined the items on the table. Lockpicks, suppressed firearm, and this. She picked up the syringe with gloved hands. We'll need to test this. One of the officers cuffed the intruder, Travis Sullivan, according to his ID, and read him his rights. Sullivan said nothing. His face was blank professional. He'd done this before. Detective Reyes called for an evidence tech, who ran a preliminary field test on the syringe's contents. On potassium chloride, the tech said grimly. High concentration. Reyes looked at me. Mr. Caldwell, do you know what this is? I shook my head. It's a chemical that stops the heart, she said. In a dose this large, it would cause cardiac arrest within minutes, and unless someone was specifically looking for it during an autopsy, it would look like a natural heart attack. My legs went weak. I sank onto the couch. They were going to make it look like I died in my sleep. He's not talking, one of the officers reported. Lawyered up immediately. Check his phone, Declan said. Reyes nodded. The tech unlocked Sullivan's phone, a burner but not wiped. Encrypted messaging app. Cryptocurrency payments and messages. The most recent one sent 12 hours ago. Make it look natural. Best a heart attack. Double payment if completed before Thanksgiving. Reyes read it aloud, then looked at me. Mr. Caldwell, do you have any idea who sent this? Yes, I said quietly. Sebastian Langston. Can you prove it? Not yet, Declan said. But we will. Reyes made a call. This just became federal. We've got a murder for hire crossing state lines, dark web facilitation, and possible connection to a prior homicide. She hung up and turned to me. The FBI is on the way. Agent Harper Sinclair arrived at 4 a.m. She was sharp-eyed, mid-40s, with the kind of presence that commanded a room without effort. She reviewed the evidence, questioned Sullivan, who refused to speak, and then sat down across from me at my kitchen table. Mr. Caldwell, she said. I'm Special Agent Harper Sinclair, FBI. As of now, this is a federal investigation. Murder for hire conspiracy and potentially connected to your wife's death. You're under our protection. I nodded, too exhausted to speak. I've been briefed by Detective Reyes and Mr. Foster. Sinclair continued. I understand you have evidence linking Sebastian Langston to this conspiracy. I'll need to see everything you have: recordings, financial records, witness statements. Why, we have it all, Declan said. Sinclair's gaze shifted to me. Mr. Caldwell, I need to ask you something. The message on Sullivan's phone mentioned a deadline before Thanksgiving. That's 3 weeks from now. Do you know why that date is significant? I stared at her, my mind racing. Thanksgiving. Why would Sebastian want me dead before Thanksgiving? I don't know, I said slowly. I don't understand. And then it hit me. Josephine's sealed will, the one Lillian had mentioned. The one that couldn't be opened until 1 year after Josephine's death. April 2025. But Thanksgiving was in late November. 3 weeks away. What happens at Thanksgiving? Sinclair asked, watching me closely. I don't know, I admitted. But Josephine left a sealed will. It can't be opened until April, 6 months from now. Sinclair exchanged a glance with Declan. Is there anything else tied to that date? A family gathering, a business meeting, I thought hard. Dennis and Celeste always hosted Thanksgiving. They invited me every year, even after Josephine died. And this year, Sinclair asked. They invited me 2 weeks ago, I said. Before the competency hearing, Sinclair leaned forward. Mr. Caldwell, I think they're planning something for Thanksgiving. If Sullivan failed tonight, they'll try again. And whatever they're planning, it's tied to that dinner. My blood ran cold. A trap. Thanksgiving dinner with my son and daughter-in-law. One last chance to finish what they'd started. What do we do? I asked. Sinclair's expression was grim. We set a trap of our own. The FBI moved me to a safe house, an unremarkable apartment in Beaverton. For 2 weeks, I lived in limbo while Agent Sinclair built her case. The safe house was comfortable but sterile, beige walls, generic furniture, the kind of place designed to be forgotten. I met with Agent Sinclair daily, answering questions, reviewing evidence, watching my life become an FBI case file. It was exhausting and necessary. Sinclair's team worked fast. Within 3 days, they had a forensic audit of Dennis's finances. The results were damning. Dennis had embezzled $2.1 million over 3 years from the family company, small transfers at first, then larger ones as he grew bolder. The money moved through offshore accounts, then vanished. Some of it went to repay Sebastian's loan. Some went to Celeste. The rest was untraceable. Your son, Sinclair said, sliding the report across the table, has been stealing from you since 2021, right around the time Celeste entered his life. I stared at the numbers, my hands shaking. He's been planning this for years, or being manipulated for years, Sinclair said. We're still trying to determine which. 5 days in the FB, I obtained a court order to exhume Josephine's body. I signed the papers with trembling hands, hating every second of it. Dr. Helena Cross, the ER physician who had saved my life after the poisoning, conducted the new autopsy. The results came back a week later. Thallium, in the bone marrow, in hair samples preserved from the original autopsy. Josephine had been poisoned over a period of 3 to 6 months. The official cause of death was changed from stroke to homicide by poisoning. Sinclair showed me the report in the safe house. Your wife was murdered, Mr. Caldwell. We can prove it now. I closed my eyes, tears streaming down my face. Josephine, my beautiful, brilliant Josephine. She had known. She had tried to warn me, and they had killed her for it. The FBI reopened the cases of Celeste's previous husbands. Spencer Reed, 2008. Hiking accident in Rocky Mountain National Park. New evidence Reed's climbing harness showed signs of deliberate wear, frayed in a way consistent with sabotage, not natural degradation. Nolan Bennett, 2010. Boat explosion on Lake Tahoe. New evidence traces of an accelerant found in archived debris from the wreckage. The explosion wasn't an accident. Both cases were now homicide investigations. Celeste was a serial killer. 10 days in the FB, I brought in Dr. Malcolm Crane and Conrad Mercer for questioning. Separately, in interrogation rooms designed to break people. Crane lawyered up within 10 minutes, refused to answer a single question. Mercer lasted 5 minutes before invoking his right to counsel. Neither of them talked. They're scared, Sinclair said. But they're more scared of Sebastian than they are of us. At least for now. The breakthrough came on day 12. Sinclair's Financial Crimes Unit traced the cryptocurrency payments from Travis Sullivan backward through a labyrinth of shell companies. The trail led to a company registered in Delaware, which was owned by a subsidiary in the Caymans, which was owned by another subsidiary in Singapore. And at the end of the chain, a holding company tied to Sebastian Langston's business empire. But it was insulated, layered, designed for plausible deniability. He's smart, Sinclair said, spreading the financial documents across the table. Every transaction has a buffer. Every company has a legitimate front. If we arrested him now, his lawyers would tear us apart in court. So what do we do? I asked. We get him to confess, Sinclair said. Or we get one of his accomplices to flip. On day 14, Agent Sinclair sat across from me in the safe house and laid out the brutal truth. Mr. Caldwell, we have enough evidence to arrest Dennis for embezzlement. We can charge Celeste with 3 counts of murder across 3 states. We can charge Dr. Crane and Conrad Mercer as accessories to murder and conspiracy. She paused. But Sebastian Langston, every connection runs through intermediaries. He's protected. Unless we get direct evidence, a confession testimony from one of the others, he walks. I felt rage boiling up inside me. So the man who orchestrated my wife's murder just gets away with it? Not necessarily, Sinclair said, leaning forward. We have one shot. Thanksgiving dinner. At your house. I stared at her. We wire your entire home, she continued. You invite all of them, Dennis, Celeste, Dr. Crane, Mercer, and Sebastian. You sit down at that table and you make them talk. You get them to admit what they did. On tape. Admissible in court. But that's... I couldn't find the words. That's insane. It's risky, Sinclair agreed. But it's our only option. Travis Sullivan won't talk. Crane and Mercer won't talk. Sebastian's too insulated to touch. But if you can get them together in one room with their guard down, people slip. They brag. They argue. They make mistakes. And if they don't, I asked. If they just sit there and eat turkey and pretend everything's fine, yeah, then you push, Sinclair said. You confront them. You call them out. You make it impossible for them to stay silent. I laughed bitterly. You're asking me to sit across from my son from the people who murdered my wife and trick them into confessing. Yes, Sinclair said simply. That's exactly what I'm asking. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. What if they try to kill me? I asked quietly. We'll have agents in place, Sinclair said. Declan will be there. The house will be under surveillance. The second things go south, we move in. The second things go south, I repeated. After they've already tried. Sinclair's expression softened. Mr. Caldwell Theodore, I know what I'm asking. I know it's dangerous. But it's the only way to get justice for Josephine, and it's the only way to stop them from hurting anyone else. I thought about Josephine. The way she'd smiled at me the day we met. The way she'd fought to protect me even as she was dying. She had been brave. Now it was my turn. Okay, I said. I'll do it. Sinclair nodded. Then let's set the trap. I spent the week preparing for what might be my last Thanksgiving. The FBI prepared for a sting operation. Both of us hoped I'd survive it. Agent Sinclair's tech team invaded my house on Tuesday morning, installing pinhole cameras in every room, microphones hidden in light fixtures, panic buttons disguised as everyday objects. I watched them turn my home into a trap, and I felt Josephine's presence in every corner. The surveillance setup took 6 hours. Cameras in the living room, dining room, kitchen, hallways, even the bathroom, just in case. Sinclair said. Microphones in the chandelier above the dining table and the smoke detectors and the decorative vases Josephine had loved. A panic button disguised as a book on the living room shelf. Another in the kitchen drawer. If anything goes wrong, Sinclair explained, you say the safe word, Josephine's favorite, and we breach immediately. Declan will be in a van outside with a tactical team. Response time 30 seconds. 30 seconds felt like an eternity, but I nodded. Understood. That afternoon, I sat down and wrote the invitations, by hand. Personal. The way Josephine would have done it. Dear Dennis, I'd like to have one more family Thanksgiving. Life is short, and I don't want to waste what time we have left on anger. Please come. Bring Celeste and Olivia. Love, Dad. I wrote similar notes to Dr. Crane, Conrad Mercer, and Sebastian, each one carefully worded, gentle, forgiving, a perfect lie. I mailed them Wednesday morning. The responses came quickly. Dennis called that evening. Dad, are you sure about this? His voice was wary, suspicious. I'm sure, I said. I've been thinking a lot about family, about what's important. I don't want us to be estranged, Dennis. You're my son. A long pause. Okay. We'll be there. 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock. I confirmed. After he hung up, I sat in the dark, my hands shaking. My son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, and I was about to destroy him. Celeste texted, "Will attend. Thank you for the invitation." Cold. Professional. No warmth. Dr. Crane sent an email, "Theodore, I appreciate the gesture. I'll be there." Conrad Mercer's assistant called, "Mr. Mercer accepts your kind invitation and will arrive at 7 p.m. And then Sebastian called. "Theodore," he said, his voice smooth. "This is a lovely gesture. I'm touched. Of course I'll be there. We're family after all." There was amusement in his tone. He knew something was off, but he was too arrogant to decline. "I'm glad," I said. "It'll be good to have everyone together." "Indeed," Sebastian said. "See you Thursday." He hung up. I stared at the phone, my stomach churning. They were all coming. Agent Sinclair briefed me Wednesday afternoon in the safe house. "Your goal," she said, "is to keep them talking, get them arguing, make them contradict each other. If Dennis breaks, the others might follow. But save Sebastian for last. He's the smartest, the most dangerous. If you push him too early, he'll shut everything down." "And if they don't talk?" I asked. Then you confront them," Sinclair said. "You call them out. You tell them what you know. Force their hand. What if they try to leave? We'll be watching. If anyone tries to run, we move in." I nodded, memorizing the plan. Declan and Lillian visited me Wednesday evening. Emotional goodbyes disguised as social calls. Lillian hugged me at the door. "Theodore, you're the bravest man I know. Josephine would be so proud of you." "I hope so," I said quietly. Declan clasped my shoulder. "I'll be in the van outside. Any trouble, we're coming in. You're not alone." "Thank you," I said, "for everything." After they left, I sat alone in Josephine's office. Her photograph smiled at me from the desk taken on our 30th anniversary, her eyes bright and full of life. "Tomorrow," I said to her picture, "I'm going to finish what you started. I'm going to make them pay for what they did. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you." The room was silent, but I felt her presence. Warm. Steady. She'd always been braver than me. I wrote a letter to Olivia, my granddaughter, 8 years old, innocent. "Dear Olivia, if Grandpa isn't here for your next birthday, know that I loved you very much. Your father made some bad choices, but you are a good, kind child, and none of this is your fault. Be brave. Be smart. And remember that love is stronger than hate. Love always, Grandpa." I sealed the letter and left it with Lillian's contact information. Just in case. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and gray. I dressed in my best suit, the navy blue one Josephine had loved. She'd always said it made me look distinguished. I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my tie. 65 years old, about to walk into a room full of people who wanted me dead. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry, and I was ready. Agent Sinclair's voice crackled through the earpiece hidden in my collar. "Theodore, you're wired. Video and audio are live. Your safe word is Josephine's favorite. Say that, and we breach immediately. Are you ready?" I looked at Josephine's photograph one last time. 40 years of love against Sebastian's 40 years of hate. "Let's end this," I whispered. At 6:30 p.m., I set the table. Plates, silverware, wine glasses, the good china Josephine had saved for special occasions. Everything perfect. Everything in place. A trap disguised as a family dinner. At 6:50, I heard the first car pull into the driveway. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. I walked to the front door and opened it. Before Theodore comes face to face with those who betrayed him, I'd like to hear your take. Down below, share your opinion. Who do you believe bears the greatest responsibility, Dennis, Celeste, or Sebastian? While you're there, give this story a score from 1 to 10, so I know you're still with me until this very moment. Your feedback and support inspire me to keep creating stories that hit even harder. A quick heads up, some upcoming moments are dramatized to strengthen the lesson and impact. If this kind of storytelling isn't your preference, feel free to step away. If you're staying, get ready. The truth is about to be revealed. They came exactly as I expected, one at a time, each wrapped in courtesy like a costume. Polite smiles, controlled gestures, carefully measured voices. But beneath the civility, I could see it now. The tension, the calculation, the shared understanding that something was shifting. By 6:30, every chair at my dining table was filled. Josephine's table, the one she polished every Sunday afternoon, the one she decorated with seasonal flowers and folded linen napkins just so. Tonight, the candles flickered against crystal glasses, and the silverware gleamed beneath soft light. It looked perfect. She would have approved of the presentation. If only she could see the audience. Dennis and Celeste sat to my right. My son avoided my eyes, fidgeting with the edge of his napkin. Celeste sat unnervingly still, spine-straight expression, smooth and unreadable. To my left sat Sebastian, my business partner of 3 decades, the man who had toasted at our anniversary dinners, the man who once called Josephine the sister I never had. Across from me sat Dr. Malcolm Crane, hands folded too tightly, and Conrad Mercer, whose jaw flexed as though he were preparing for litigation rather than dinner. At the far end of the table, Harold and Irene Sutton, my unsuspecting neighbors, served as an anchor of innocence. I had invited them intentionally. Witnesses disguised as dinner guests, a buffer of normalcy. Small talk floated across the table during appetizers. Weather, property taxes, the state of the markets. Every sentence felt rehearsed, every laugh too sharp, everyone watching everyone else. I played my part, the grieving widower, the gracious host. "Thank you all for coming," I said, lifting my glass slightly. "It's been a difficult year." Dennis cleared his throat. "Dad, this means a lot. Family should stay united. Family." The word echoed strangely in my ears. I smiled faintly. Family. Yes. That's exactly what I'd like to discuss tonight. The air tightened. Forks paused mid-air. Glasses hovered above placemats. At precisely 7 o'clock, I rose from my chair and tapped my wine glass with a spoon. The sound rang clear and sharp. In another room, agents from the FBI were listening, recording, waiting. "I want to thank all of you for being here," I began calmly. "Some of you I've known for decades. Some of you I believed I understood." Silence. I turned my gaze to Dr. Crane. "Malcolm," I said evenly, "you signed my wife's death certificate. Cause of death, stroke." He stiffened. "But you never ordered an autopsy." He placed his fork down slowly. "Theodore, I don't think Thanksgiving dinner is appropriate for—" I had Josephine exhumed, I interrupted quietly. The words landed like a dropped plate. A second autopsy was performed. Independent. Thorough. I let the pause linger. She was poisoned. Thallium. Administered gradually over months. Harold gasped softly. I slid the report across the table. Dr. Crane's complexion drained of color. I don't understand," he stammered. "Don't you?" I asked. I reached into my jacket and placed my phone on the table. With a tap, an audio file began to play. Dr. Crane's voice filled the room, recorded unmistakable. "The patient's decline is progressing as expected." Then Sebastian's voice. "Good. Keep me informed." The recording ended. The silence afterward was suffocating. "That's manipulated," Dr. Crane snapped weakly. "Out of context." "The Bureau has 6 additional recordings," I replied. "All consistent." Harold looked from one face to another, horrified. "Theodore, what is happening?" "Please remain seated," I said gently. "You are witnesses now." I turned to Conrad Mercer. Conrad I continued, my voice steady. "You filed documents declaring me mentally incompetent. You forged my signature to initiate guardianship proceedings." Mercer shot to his feet. "I will not sit here and tolerate these accusations." Before he could reach the hallway, Declan stepped calmly into the doorway. "Sit down," Declan said evenly. "We're not finished." Mercer's eyes burned with fury, but he sat. I slid a stack of printed emails across the table. Highlighted phrases. Expedite the process. Make it appear natural. These were your words, Conrad. Sent to my son. Mercer said nothing. The calculation in his eyes was almost visible. Then I turned to Celeste. She remained poised, hands folded. Celeste, I said softly. Or perhaps Valerie or Vivian. A flicker. Barely there. I laid out the files one by one. Valerie Whitman. Married to Spencer Reed. Hiking accident. $800,000 payout. A photograph followed the frayed climbing harness re-examined by federal analysts. Sabotaged. No reaction. Vivian Blackwood. Married to Nolan Bennett. Boat explosion. 1.5 million. Another photo evidence tags marking debris soaked in accelerant. Not mechanical failure. Deliberate ignition. I arranged the photographs like cards in a losing hand. Irene covered her mouth. And now I said quietly, "You marry my son." 6 months later, my wife is dead. Celeste's expression remained glacial. "You have a pattern," I continued. Wealthy men, sudden deaths, insurance collections, new identity. She tilted her head slightly. "It's a compelling narrative," she said calmly. "But narratives aren't convictions." "You're right," I replied. "Evidence is." I placed a final document on the table: financial records. The Bureau traced payments from an offshore account to Dr. Crane. That same account received transfers from Dennis. Prior to that, from Sebastian. Celeste stood abruptly. "This is absurd," she said. "You invited us here to stage a theatrical accusation." She moved toward the doorway. "Sit down," I said, my voice no longer soft. She paused. Declan shifted, blocking her path. She stared at him, then at me, and slowly resumed her seat. "Fine," she said coolly. "Let's finish this." I turned to Dennis. "My son." His face was pale. His hands shook visibly now. "Dennis," I said quietly. "When you married her, did you know who she was?" He swallowed hard. "Dad, did you know she intended to kill your mother?" His head snapped up. "No, I swear to you, no. But you knew about the money," I pressed. 2.1 million siphoned from the company. He closed his eyes. "To pay Sebastian," I continued. "To cover losses. To maintain appearances." "I didn't have a choice," he whispered. "There is always a choice," I said. Celeste leaned back, her tone icy. "You have no confession. No proof tying me to Josephine's death. You're speculating because grief has clouded your judgment." Her composure was extraordinary, chilling. I stepped closer to Dennis. "Tell me the truth," I said softly. "Did you help her?" Tears spilled down his face. For the first time that night, the facade shattered. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Not at first. I thought it was business. That Sebastian just wanted leverage over you. I didn't know about the poison." His voice cracked. But once I realized, he covered his face. It was too late. I was already trapped. Celeste's head snapped toward him. "Stop talking." But the dam had broken. "They said it would look natural," Dennis sobbed. "That no one would question it." The room felt colder. Sebastian's jaw tightened. Dr. Crane's breathing grew shallow. Mercer stared at the table. Harold and Irene looked shattered. I stood at the head of the table, listening to my son confess to being complicit, not by direct action, but by silence, by greed, by fear. The perfect crime had relied on obedience, on loyalty twisted into submission, and now the masks were slipping. Outside, the evening remained calm. Inside, the truth had finally begun to breathe. And as Dennis wept, I understood something devastating. The conspiracy had not been built in anger. It had been built in quiet conversations, in whispered agreements, in signatures and transfers and calculated patience. And tonight at Josephine's table, it was collapsing, one confession at a time. Dennis couldn't meet my eyes. His hands trembled beneath the table. Beside him, Celeste leaned close and hissed, "Don't say anything." But I could see it in his face. He was breaking. I kept pushing even as it shattered my heart. I slid the stack of documents across the table. The papers rustled loudly in the suffocating silence. Every pair of eyes turned toward me. The wall clock ticked overhead each second like a blade twisting deeper into my chest. $2,100,000, I said, my voice steady and cold. Embezzled over 3 years, hidden in offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Grand Cayman specifically. Dennis's mouth opened. His lips trembled as if to deny it, but no sound came out. Dad, I can explain, his voice cracked. Your mother discovered it? I said, cutting him off. I pulled out the photocopied journal page, Josephine's elegant handwriting painfully familiar, and placed it in front of him. I pointed to a single line written in dark blue ink. March 2023. She wrote about it here. I read the words aloud slowly. Dennis is stealing from his father. I need to find proof. Dennis flinched as if struck. Sweat gathered on his forehead. Dad, your mother spent the last 6 months of her life investigating you. I continued, my voice trembling despite my effort to control it. The woman who gave birth to you, raised you, loved you more than her own life. She cried every night, Dennis. Did you know that? I didn't want this, he sobbed. Tears poured down his face. I was drowning in debt. An investment went bad. I didn't know what to do. Then Sebastian said he could help, but then Celeste. Shut up, Dennis, Celeste snapped, but he couldn't stop. The words spilled out like a dam collapsing. I'm sorry, Dad. I never wanted this. They said Mom wouldn't suffer. Dr. Crane promised she'd pass peacefully. I didn't think, I never thought she'd find out. His voice broke completely. I just needed money to pay off the debts. I was weak, and then it was too late to stop. My chest felt crushed. My son. My blood. Did you know they were going to kill your mother? Dennis shook his head violently, tears dropping onto his lap. Not at first. I thought it was just making her sick, to keep you distracted, to buy time. But by the time I realized, she already knew. She confronted Celeste in February. He looked at Celeste, voice shaking. And Celeste said it was too late. That if I didn't see it through, I'd go down too. The room went deathly still. Then Dennis whispered, barely audible, it was Sebastian's plan. All of it. He orchestrated everything from the beginning. I slowly turned toward the man seated at the far end of the table, Sebastian Langston. The man who had eaten at my table hundreds of times. My closest friend for 30 years. He sat perfectly still, wineglass in hand, watching with calm fascination, as if observing a performance. 30 years, Sebastian? I said, my voice ice cold. You've been playing a very long game. Sebastian set his glass down slowly. Theodore, your son, is having a breakdown. This is unfortunate. Perhaps we should call lawyers and a psychiatrist before this gets worse. You were at my house when Josephine died, I said, never breaking eye contact. You called 911 8 minutes before Dennis. Why were you there? The smile faded from Sebastian's face. He scanned the table, Dennis shaking Celeste, pale Dr. Crane staring down, Conrad Mercer shifting in his seat. Then he looked back at me, and I saw it, the hatred he'd carried for 40 years. Sebastian stood. The mask was gone. His voice dropped cold and venomous. Fine, Theodore. You want the truth. I said nothing. Yes. I planned everything he said, stepping forward, eyes fever bright. I buried Dennis in debt. I introduced Celeste, knowing exactly who she was. 2 dead husbands. I chose her for a reason. He laughed bitterly. I owned Dr. Crane with a $300,000 gambling debt. Enough to ruin him. Enough to ensure obedience. His voice shook with rage. I watched Josephine suffer. I counted every day she weakened, knowing she chose you over me. He leaned closer, whispering, she called your name at the end. I was there. I held her hand. And even dying, she still chose you. His voice turned vicious. So I made sure you lost everything she loved. Your son, your company, your life. That's justice. Silence. Then, FBI, nobody move. Doors burst open. Agents in tactical gear flooded the room. Weapons raised. Orders shouted. Dr. Crane screamed, hands up. Mercer collapsed into his chair. Dennis broke down, sobbing. Celeste didn't move. Special Agent Harper Sinclair stepped forward. You are all under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, and federal crimes. Sebastian stared at me in shock. You recorded everything. I stood. Josephine taught me how. Handcuffs snapped shut. As they were led away, Sebastian locked eyes with me, hatred burning until the end. When the room emptied, only silence remained. Declan entered, resting a hand on my shoulder. You did it. I picked up Josephine's photo, holding it close. I promised, I whispered. Josephine had fought to the end, and I finished what she started. 2 months later, I stood in the courtroom and watched justice be served. It felt nothing like victory. The sentencing hearing was swift and clinical. Judge Lang read each verdict aloud. I sat in the gallery, Lillian and Declan flanking me, listening to numbers that would never bring Josephine back. Dennis Caldwell, 15 years federal prison, reduced for cooperation and remorse. Celeste Caldwell, life without parole. 3 counts of murder. Spencer Reed, Nolan Bennett, Josephine Caldwell. Dr. Malcolm Crane, 20 years. Conspiracy to commit murder fraud. Conrad Mercer, 10 years. Obstruction of justice conspiracy. Sebastian Langston, life imprisonment, death penalty under consideration. Mastermind. Multiple counts. When the gavel fell, I felt nothing. Just hollow. A week later, I visited Dennis at the county jail before his transfer. Glass partition. Phone pressed to ear. My son looked smaller, somehow diminished. Dad, I don't expect forgiveness, Dennis whispered, voice breaking. I just want you to know. Mom loved you more than anything. She told me that even at the end. She said you were the best man she'd ever known. My throat tightened. I know, son, I know. That was all I could say. All I had left to give him. The sealed will was opened by court order in mid-January. Lillian brought me to her office. She handed me the documents with reverence. Inside, complete evidence against Sebastian, financial crimes, communications documents Josephine had collected for 20 years. She had been building a case long before she knew she was dying. And beneath it all, a letter. My dearest Theodore, if you are reading this, you survived. I knew you would. You are stronger than you ever believed. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything. I tried to protect you until I had irrefutable proof. Whatever time we had left, I wanted it to be full of love, not fear. Use the time you have now to live fully. Live for both of us. I love you, always have, always will. Josephine. I pressed the letter to my chest and wept. Declan put his hand on my shoulder and waited in silence. Josephine had also established a fund, the Josephine Caldwell Foundation, for victims of domestic violence and elder abuse, seeded with $200,000 from our savings. She had planned her legacy even as she was being poisoned. I sold the company in February. 50% of the proceeds went to Josephine's foundation. The rest I used to rebuild. Declan and Lillian became fixtures in my life. Sunday dinners, holidays, the family I had lost and found again. Declan introduced me to his daughter. Lillian invited me to her book club. I renovated Josephine's office into a memorial library. Her photos, her favorite books, a peaceful space where I could feel her presence, and I volunteered. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I worked at the foundation, helping others navigate the darkness I had survived. One evening in early March, I stood at Josephine's grave. Fresh flowers in hand, white lilies, her favorite. You saved me, I said quietly, even after you were gone. Your evidence, your preparation, your love, it was enough. The wind rustled through the trees. I promise I'll honor the time you gave me. I'll make sure no one else suffers what we did." I knelt, placed my hand on the cold marble headstone. "Thank you, my love, for everything." A month later, I found myself at a support group session, guiding a younger widower through his grief. He was raw, broken, lost. He looked at me, eyes hollow. "How do you move forward after losing everything?" I thought of Josephine, of Declan and Lillian, of my granddaughter Olivia, whom I still saw Dennis had given permission before his transfer. "You don't get over it," I said. "You move through it, and you let the people who love you carry some of the weight." He nodded, tears falling. I stayed with him until he was ready to leave. That night, I sat in Josephine's library, her journal open on my lap. I read her words again, words of love, of fear, of determination. Theodore is the strongest man I know. If something happens to me, he will find the truth, and he will survive. She had believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. They say grief never ends. But I've learned something else, neither does love. Josephine's love protected me from beyond the grave, and it will guide me for whatever time I have left. This isn't just survival, this is grace. And to you listening to this family story, I want to leave you with something deeper than shock, deeper than drama, deeper even than justice. I want to leave you with truth, because if there is one thing this family story taught me, it's this: God gives us wisdom to discern truth from lies, and He gives us strength to face darkness when it finally reveals itself. I learned that lesson the hardest way possible, through betrayal, grief, and the slow unraveling of everything I once believed was secure. When I look back on my own family story, I don't just see villains and crimes. I see my own mistakes. I trusted too easily. I dismissed small inconsistencies. I chose comfort over confrontation. I let decades of friendship blind me to warning signs that in hindsight were impossible to ignore. Evil rarely announces itself loudly. More often it slips quietly into familiar spaces, into friendships, into marriages, into family dinners. And when you ignore your instincts long enough, you give it room to grow. Don't be like me. Don't wait for tragedy to force you into awareness. If something feels wrong in your family, investigate it. If someone you love begins acting differently, guarded, secretive, manipulative, ask questions. Not from paranoia, but from wisdom. Protecting your family does not mean blindly trusting everyone within it. Sometimes love requires courage. Sometimes it requires uncomfortable conversations. Sometimes it requires seeing what you desperately wish were not true. This dad revenge story isn't really about revenge at all. It never was. On the surface, it may look like justice served and enemies defeated. But underneath that, it is about protection. It is about honoring the person you loved by refusing to let their suffering be erased. My so-called dad revenge was never fueled by hatred. It was fueled by love for Josephine. Every action I took, every confrontation, every risk was driven by the desire to defend the truth she died trying to uncover. In many ways, this belongs alongside other grandpa stories. You may have heard stories where an older man is underestimated, dismissed, or seen as fragile. Society often assumes age equals weakness, but age also brings clarity. It brings patience. It brings perspective. And sometimes it brings the resolve to stand firm when everyone else expects you to collapse. If you've followed grandpa stories before, you know they aren't about physical strength. They're about resilience. They're about wisdom earned through pain. Still, let me be clear, revenge by itself is empty. Dad revenge, if it stops at punishment, leaves you hollow. True victory is not watching someone fall. True victory is rebuilding after the storm. It's taking the pain that tried to break you and transforming it into purpose. It's creating something meaningful out of loss. For me, that meant honoring Josephine's legacy. It meant using what she prepared: the evidence, the courage, the foresight, not only to bring justice, but to protect others from similar darkness. That is the real lesson in this family story. Vigilance is an act of love. The moment you stop paying attention, the moment you assume everything is fine simply because it's familiar, that's when danger finds its opening. It doesn't always look dramatic. It doesn't always look evil. Sometimes it looks like a trusted friend. Sometimes it looks like a charming spouse. Sometimes it even looks like your own child making small mistakes. But wisdom means asking hard questions early. Strength means facing answers you may not want to hear. And faith, real faith, is not pretending evil doesn't exist. It is believing that light will ultimately overcome it. I also want to speak directly to those of you who have lived through betrayal in your own homes. If you've experienced manipulation, financial abuse, deception, or emotional harm from someone you loved, you are not weak for having trusted them. Trust is not stupidity. It is a virtue. The wrongdoing belongs to the one who exploited it. What matters now is what you do next. You rebuild. You protect your boundaries. You learn without becoming bitter. You remain strong without becoming hardened. Many grandpa stories end with isolation, a lonely figure standing victorious but alone. I refuse to let that be my ending. I chose connection. I chose community. I chose healing. Because justice without healing is just another form of emptiness. And I would not allow Josephine's memory to be attached to emptiness. Love fiercely. That means show up for the people who truly deserve it. Protect wisely. That means don't ignore your intuition. Trust carefully. That means earn trust through actions, not words. And when the worst happens, and sometimes it will, do not allow it to redefine your character. You are more than what was done to you. You are more than the betrayal you endured. You are more than the chapter that tried to end you. If this family story moved you, challenged you, or helped you see something in your own life more clearly, I invite you to share your thoughts. Have you ever faced betrayal within your own family story? Did you ignore warning signs, or did you confront them early? How did you find the strength to move forward? Your experiences matter. Someone reading your comment might find hope in it. If you've enjoyed listening to grandpa stories like this, stories about resilience, justice, and redemption, consider supporting the channel. Like this video. Share it with someone who may need encouragement. Subscribe for more powerful grandpa stories and family story journeys that challenge, inspire, and remind us that darkness never gets the final word. Your time here means more than you know. In a world filled with noise, you chose to sit with a story about love, betrayal, justice, and grace. That matters. And finally, please remember, while this story is rooted in emotional truth and meaningful lessons, some elements have been dramatized for educational and entertainment purposes. The purpose is not sensationalism, it is reflection. If this kind of content resonates with you, stay. If not, there are countless other paths you can explore. But wherever you go next, carry this with you. Discern carefully, love deeply, stand firm in truth, and never underestimate the quiet strength that lives inside you.